Very good morning to you. Welcome to SABC's Newsroom. I'm Shanta Yankees. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. I'm not alone. Standing by is Valen Kirtley for your sports. First things first, let's have a look at your headlines. Well, Parliament's Mineral Resources Committee is expected to discuss terms of reference on the allegations of state capture. Do they or do they not now have a viable contingency plan for the payment of social grants come the 1st of April, as Lassa answers to Parliament this morning? The world mourns the death of Britain's most famous modern-day scientist, Stephen Hawking, who died at the age of 76.
And Mamelodi Sundowns join the 6 other PSL teams in the quarterfinals, but have a little trouble removing the ECP's sting as they come from a goal down to beat the 3rd division side 2-1.
Having a look at your top story at 9 o'clock, the Mineral Resources Portfolio Committee will today discuss the terms of reference for its own inquiry into allegations of state capture against former Mineral Resources Minister Mosebenzi Zwane. Well, the former Mineral Resource Minister missed a number of opportunities to explain his involvement to the committee before he was removed from cabinet last month. Zwane is accused of facilitating a controversial sale of Optimum Mine from Glencore to Gupta-linked Trillion. Well, SASSA is today expected to give a progress report in Parliament. This relates to last year's Constitutional Court order. The order paved the way for a new grants payment provider by the 1st of the next month. Well, SASSA's acting CEO says that the announced contingency plan to manage the cash component of the social grant system, where the Constitutional Court to deny an extension of the invalid CPS contract, is only a work in progress. The Constitutional Court last week demanded that both SASSA and the South African Police Office clarify the contingency measures put into place to deal with the payments of social grants. The latest 3 suspects arrested in connection with the killing of 2 children, one with albinism, in Mpumalanga will appear in court today. Well, 5 people have now been arrested in connection with the murders at the Vosman area near Witbank in January. A traditional leader believed to be from Swaziland is among the suspects. The traditional healer and a co-accused appeared in court yesterday, and their case has been postponed to next Tuesday. Gabisile Shabane, who had albinism, and her cousin Nkosikona Ngwenya were kidnapped from their home in Vosman by armed men. A month later, the body of Shabane was found buried in a shallow grave, while Ngwenya's body had to be retrieved from a stream at Emalahleni. Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene travels to New York today as he continues to woo investors ahead of an upcoming review by Moody's later this month. His investors' roadshow got underway in London, where SABC correspondent Catherine Drew asked about the reception he received.
It has actually been very warm. There is a lot of interest also, which is quite encouraging. That the investors are paying this kind of attention to our economy and what is happening back home.
What sort of reception have you got from the ratings agencies, and do you think you've done enough to avoid a downgrade?
Look, it's not only about just avoiding a ratings downgrade. It's about doing good in the interest of the country, and in the process, what then happens? What then happens is that if we do good in terms of economic growth, in terms of dealing with our risks, and in terms of dealing with challenges pertaining to dealing with the bottlenecks in the economy, all of those things first and foremost address our own challenges of creating employment, of dealing with poverty alleviation, of dealing with issues of underdevelopment and inequalities. In the process then, as we are able to achieve that, that is what also the ratings agencies would do. But as you would recall that Moody's was in South Africa last week. They were the first people also that we met with when we came here, also to check the consistency of the messaging, but also the credibility of our story. Because as we are here as a delegation that is made up of government, business, labor, it is clear that we all have, one purpose, and we are united in achieving that purpose.
Well, the Electoral Commission says it hopes to have a verified voters' toll by June this year after the past voter registration weekend. IEC Chief Electoral Officer Saip Mamabolo says 2.76 million people visited voting stations. Well, of that, more than 1.3 re-registered in their current voting district. More than 880,000 changed their registration to a new voting district, and more than 490,000 were registering as voters for the very first time. Mamabolo says about 300,000 people who visited the voting stations are among the 2.8 million voters whom the IEC did not have an address going into the weekend. Well, British theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking has died at the age of 76, the UK Press Association reported yesterday. Hawking sought to explain some of the most complicated questions of life while himself working under the shadow of a likely premature death. His formidable mind probed the very limits of human understanding, both in the vastness of space and in the bizarre sub-molecular world of quantum theory, which he said could predict what happens at the beginning and the end of time. His work ranged from the origins of the universe itself through the tantalizing prospect of time travel to the mysteries of space's all-consuming black holes. Hawking continued to practice work in theoretical physics throughout the rest of his life, helping to launch projects to find intelligent extraterrestrial life and contributing to a range of scientific prizes and research. Let's have a look at our question of the day. What do you consider a false prophet? You can send us your comments on that SABC Newsroom. When we come back, we'll have a look at some of those tweets.
After a horrific accident, major questions were asked.
So step one, I asked myself, do I really want to die? And my answer to that was, I'm not sure. And then step two was, do I want my parents to bury me? And the answer to that was no.
Learning kept his brain in full action on how the brain works.
When I was in hospital, right, as I was saying, to catch up with my peers, I started to become obsessed with memory techniques and how the brain works and how we retain information.
Touching lives is his continuous mission.
I now work for a non-profit where we deal with access issues regarding kids with disabilities and persons with disability. We're busy working on beach access.
Being wheelchair-bound did not stop fun in his life.
I party in a wheelchair, I laugh in a wheelchair, I smile in a wheelchair.
For all your uplifting stories, catch Bupilong every Friday.
SABCnews.com is your one-stop digital portal to all the news you need. With a website that is easy to use on mobile, SABC News prides itself in being the primary source of public service content across multiple platforms. Watch live streams of all the big news events on the SABC News YouTube channel, which is one of the most viewed South African YouTube channels globally. And catch up on the best of SABC television and radio news. Follow breaking news on all of the SABC News social media platforms, interact with SABC News on Facebook, and stay connected on Twitter for the latest headlines and real-time updates by our reporters. SABC News, everywhere.
Organisers of a protest march dubbed a March Against False Prophets, scheduled for today in Johannesburg, say the protest will go ahead even with ongoing attempts by one charismatic church leader to interdict aspects of the protest. Well, victims of false prophets and their supporters will hit the streets today as part of the Human Rights Month. Well, the focal point of the march is to say enough is enough with regards to sexual abuses, rape, manipulations and deceptions, which many Christians have experienced in the hands of false prophets. The protest march is organized under various themes and hashtags like hashtag sexual abuse, hashtag no deception and no manipulation. But for more on this, we are joined in studio by the protest organizer, Solomon Izang Ashoms. Very good morning to you, Solomon. Thank you very much for joining us. Before we get into this morning's interview, can you explain your T-shirt? What is that?
A T-shirt just trying to encourage faithfulness to one partner.
That's the message behind it.
That's the message. The message is also God loves sex. You know, He created it for procreation and also for pleasure and entertainment. But we have to be faithful. So covenant partner is basically saying somebody that you've agreed that, look, we're going to go this journey of life together. Not having multiple partners and all that. That's what I try to push.
All right. So it's a very different view. Can you tell us about today's protest march and the aim behind it?
Yeah, the aim behind it is just to really create awareness. You know, there are a lot of people that have been living in pain because they've been hurt by false prophets within the church, leaders, apostles, bishops, you know, and the Bible is very clear that we're going to have false prophets in Matthew 24. But how do we deal with it? For us, we're not trying to exterminate false prophets because they're always going to be there. But how do we save and how do we support those who have been raped, those who have lost money, those who have been sexually abused? Some of the people protesting today, the girls, they have kids from a rape situation with a prophet. You know, and the prophet don't want to take responsibility. Some of them long time ago. There's a lady who was married and she has a baby. She was raped. You know, she had a husband, but she was raped by someone who was her spiritual father. So we're trying to say, look, enough is enough. The church has not done enough for me. I don't think we have the solution and say, look, this is how we should deal with it. So we're trying to say, from a legal perspective and from a church perspective, we need to do much more to be able to support them because people are really hurting. And that is what really, for us, that's what breaks our heart. And we just want to march just so their voices would be heard. Look, we're here. We need support. There are so many of them in churches and in our communities. And it's about time that we say something about it.
A very interesting view that you hold. And, you know, religion is always a very contentious issue because it essentially comes down to what an individual believes. How then does one determine that you are a false prophet and you are a true prophet, because it then becomes down to belief?
That's right. The Bible is very clear about it. If you go to the book of Ezekiel 13, the Bible is my yardstick. So whatever I say is from there. Ezekiel 13 from 1 to 16 is very explicit. You know, false prophets, you would see, they prophesy based on their own needs. They prophesy peace when there is tribulation. They prophesy just to suit your emotions. And we see a lot of that, you know. And you also have to look at the area of character. Sometimes we watch prophets on TV, we watch them from the pulpit, we watch them dress nice and they drive big cars, or they have a congregation of 10,000. But that doesn't mean you're real. That's just a facade. That's just a brand that you've created. The thing is character. Do you have godly character? How do you treat your wife? How do you treat congregation? Are you prideful? So we have to investigate people that we follow. We don't just follow them because they're eloquent on TV or they know the word of God and they preach it. You know, I wouldn't tell anybody, like, you must follow this prophet because he's a true prophet, or that prophet is a false prophet, because my false prophet may be different from your false prophet.
Yeah, and that's essentially, you know, what I'm trying to get at, because if I believe that what you're telling me is true and you're saying that he's a false prophet, but if I believe him, you know, in religion, that's my faith, that's my belief. But let's hear what South Africans and other people on Twitter are saying this morning. It's our question of the day that we're running. What do you actually make of, or what do you consider a false prophet? That is our question that we're asking here on SABC Newsroom this morning. Let's have a look at some of the tweets that have already come through this morning. This one coming in from Zandile says that anyone who uses the word of God for self-enrichment while claiming to be performing miracles only to find out that everything is staged. Another one coming in here from Gudani. Any person that preaches and expects to be paid after Jesus needed no remuneration, why should you?
There's so many of that in the church today, where you pay for prayer, you pray for water, you pray for anointing oil.
Let's have a look at the last one coming in here, Solomon. This one comes in from Chief Whip on Twitter saying a spiritual liar. Well, he believes that a false prophet, or what you deem a false prophet, is a spiritual liar. So you going in protest of some of the issues that you brought forward. Give us the main plight of today's march, as well as the support that you have garnered and you've gathered, or if you've gotten any.
Yeah, we have quite a bit of teams. I just brought a few of this.
Oh, wow, you came prepared.
I came prepared. So this is the main issue here: sex in the pulpit.
What is that?
Sex in the pulpit is basically saying, the leaders who govern the pulpit, which is where you preach from in church, leadership. There's a lot of sex going on there, illegal sex, adultery, a lot of fornication that's going on there. And I'm talking about the church context here. So it's based on the Bible. You're not generalizing it in any way. We're saying there's sex in the pulpit. We need to clean ourselves. And then we have this, which is, we need to clean the church. Mm-hmm. We believe the church has allowed a lot of, false prophets to come in. Some of them started well, but today they are not doing what they're supposed to do. And finally, we have this one here, which is prophets for sale, which is what we saw from one of the tweets, where you pay
the money issue.
Yeah, the money issue. But the main theme that we're going to be dealing with today, when we have victims, is sex in the pulpit, mm-hmm. where we see a lot of abuses, sexual abuses, a lot of rape sometimes. You force yourself on women. And these are real situations. People are living with it. But we don't talk about it. Sometimes we tell people, go and pray about it. It will go away. Or let God handle it. We cannot do that, because for a prophet to rape a woman in church, it's a criminal issue. It's not a church issue anymore. We need to move it to a legal perspective, because that's a crime.
So let's move on to churches. Earlier on, you said that you don't necessarily feel that there's enough support coming from the church.
That's right. And we didn't invite one church to come up and march with us.
Why not?
Because we just feel as Christians we can do it. It's not because we have problems with churches. There's a lot of politics in churches sometimes, and we don't want to get mixed up into it. And we just invited the victims. That's why we say this march is supposed to be for the victims. We have a lot of other people saying, hey, we want to come support the victims. It's okay, and people from different churches, but we didn't send a single letter to say, hey, we're inviting you to come be with us. And we agree with the church totally. There are great prophets, there are great pastors, there are great churches, but the little that are there and really creating criminal conduct, we need to be able to deal with it for the sake of these victims, just so we're going to be able to make sure the credibility of the church is restored.
Staying with churches and the credibility thereof, let's have a look at the cloud that has somewhat been cast over foreign pastors in the country. What do you make of that? Do you look at it as a form of xenophobia?
Some of them, yes, because there are legit foreign pastors. There are certain foreign pastors also that are not legit. One thing with foreign pastors, if you go to West Africa, I'm going to be honest here, I'm from Nigeria originally. Okay. If you go to West Africa, false prophets are rampant. They are way ahead of the false prophet here. They know how to really conduct themselves and really very cunning. So gradually it came into South Africa by some people. They brought it in. You see fake miracles being created. You see money in your pocket when they pray for you, and all this kind of gimmicks that we see. So, but not all of them are that way. There are genuine prophets and pastors and church leaders that came from Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, that are here today, Zimbabwe, that are here today and are really helping people. They are really leading people and also doing a lot in the community, dealing with social ills like prostitution or drug addiction and all that kind of stuff. But the few that are there that are not doing well, sometimes you tend to use the same brush to brush everybody. Mm-hmm. And it becomes quite a bit of xenophobia. Just staging this march myself, I got a lot of xenophobic attack, from people because they know my nationality and they're like, how can you do that? Who are you anyway? I got over 100 phone calls just to try to tell me, no, you're marching against this prophet. You cannot march against this prophet. Yesterday we went to court, but the court said, the judge says we could proceed with the march, mm-hmm. Which is something that we really want to, because this march is about the victims. It's not really about, naming people and putting them out there. It's about the victims, making sure their voice is heard. But sometimes we have to be careful that because even in the church we have a lot of xenophobic tendencies that is really going to divide us instead of uniting us together. Deal with somebody not based on his nationality, deal with him based on his character. Don't try to push him.
And for somebody that would want to go see a prophet, what is your advice? I mean, you seem to have studied it, or you seem to know the characteristics of a false prophet quite extensively. For somebody in layman's terms, what should they look out for?
I think it's very simple. You know, is the person biblical? There are a lot of elements to look at. Is the person biblical? Do you have to pay to see him? Is the person going to give you some water, some oil to go use? Are there anything that you need to buy to help with your prayer life? You know, those are the kind of things. Do you have to pay? Do you have to be there for a long queue? How is the attitude of the people around them? From the person that picked the phone call when you call, you know, are they pleasant enough? You know, because everything is staged. With false prophets, everything is staged. It's a brand. You know, is he making himself too exclusive? Is he really biblical? Is he giving you scriptures? Because at the end of the day, whatever we do is about scriptures. That's where we draw our inspiration from.
Indeed. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. Protest organizer Solomon Izang Ashom. Let's have a look at our question of the day once again. What do you consider a false prophet is the question that we're asking here today. And Solomon seems to know quite extensively what to look out for. I myself would not necessarily know. Let's have a look at some of the tweets that have been coming through this morning again. This one coming in from Tate saying, a false prophet are just opportunists who prey on people's desperation. We need to be careful on who we follow. Hashtag March Against False Prophets. Raymond says there are church forums. Why don't they act? Indeed, let's move on. Let's have a look at our poll question today. We're asking, as society, are we actually doing enough to protect our children? With just over 300 votes coming in, 17% of you are saying yes, 83% of you are saying no. Let's have a look at our sports question of the day. We're asking you, the race to succeed Danny Jordan gets heated. Who should become the new SAFA president? Send us your comments on at SABC Newsroom. Also have a look at those a little bit later on, coming up in your sports with Valen Kirtley. Let's move on online now. Let's have a look at what's making headlines front page and centre on the continent this morning. We'll start off in South Africa. Well, the Sowetan reports that a police officer tasked with investigating allegations of sexual abuse at a Soweto school allegedly forced 2 of the 87 victims to undress in a classroom and molested them. Moving to Namibia, the Namibian reports that veteran Namibian politician Nora Shimming Chase has died after a long battle with cancer. And finally, in Swaziland, the Swaziland Observer reports that expectant women residing in Babane and the outskirts will have to bear with the inconvenience for at least a week before seeking help at the Babane Government Hospital maternity ward, where renovations at the labour ward are underway. And what you can expect coming up after the break, let's have a look. The United Nations warns that over 7 million people in South Sudan could become severely food insecure in the coming months unless aid is urgently provided.
Over 5% of the world's population, or 360 million people, has disabling hearing loss.
Sometimes babies are born that can't hear.
Yeah.
And especially during the pregnancy, where there's some infections that mom could pick up that can actually transmit that damage to the ear, and those children can be born deaf.
I don't look at myself as a disabled person. I looked at myself as Bruno, not with a disability. I don't have barriers. I use South African Sign Language because I have a language.
And unfortunately, we need to talk to the teenagers and the young people out there. I know it's now fine to go to the concerts and listen to that loud music, but you're actually damaging those little hair cells all the time. And you're not going to pay the price now. You're going to pay the price when you turn 45, 50. And then all of a sudden, we're going to see the damage done.
For all your health news, join Health Talk every Saturday from 9 to 10.
Special assignment. Crime keeps the society in terror and pain. Why so?
If someone phones me, this phones me, tells me, okay, look here, you need a silver. And I get you all driving, I'll take it.
What pushes normal people to be so hard, heartless, and brutally kill one another?
The other side of it could be more for their own psychological need. It might be part of a sexual fantasy that they have. It could be about power and control.
After proper investigation is followed, the perpetrator gets arrested.
It's quite a massive process. And Outbreak will pay payments, so I think justice is served.
Emotional scars remain.
We would pay any price to get him back, and the sad reality is that it's gone.
Special assignment. We unravel the truth every Sunday at 21:30.
The United Nations warns that over 7 million people in South Sudan could become severely food insecure in the coming months unless aid is urgently provided. Mixed reaction to the firing of United States Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. Thousands take to the streets of Conakry in Ghana protesting against the ongoing closure of public schools and calling for the resignation of President Alpha Conde. Leading at the half hour, Ulundi Shopping Mall has been gutted by a fire and no fatalities have been reported so far, and the cause of the fire is not known. Well, the devastating fire ripped through the shopping mall last night. Firemen battled with it throughout the night, with a local municipality that is without a disaster management department. The firefighters had to wait for hours for the district municipality to finally arrive. The extent of the damage is yet to be revealed. For the latest on the fire, we are now joined by Ulundi City Manager Toti Zulu. A very good morning to you, Mr. Zulu. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. What is the extent of the damage?
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers and listeners. Well, as your voice is pointed out, that complex was affected by fire. And unfortunately, that's why one can underline the fact that English has a functional and healthy relationship with our provincial and state courts. However, as local municipalities, we are bequeathed with similar incidents of disasters and especially fires to dwellings such as homes and properties. And we have raised misgivings provincial government, and we've put in applications because unfortunately, as rural municipalities, whether low-cost municipalities, we have a problem because we cannot fund our own fire combating efforts. We therefore appeal to the provincial court to review the policy of dealing with district municipalities And in fact, the request quarter, especially in the province of KwaZulu, and to consider funding certain municipalities. Because the incident of yesterday, as we have rightly pointed out, should have been avoided had adequate assistance arrived this time. Our guys were on site, local municipality, however, without adequate necessary equipment to fight that rising fire. So we feel that government were to assist us as municipalities funding taxes, our own fire engines, we're in a position to at least minimize the damage to our property.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning on the line, Mr. Toti Zulu, of course, giving us updates on that Ulundi shopping mall fire, also giving reasons as to why the municipality does not have its own disaster management task team, it seems, as well as the support that Mr. Zulu is calling for from government on municipal level. Moving on, the Nelson Mandela Foundation CEO Selo Hatang has made a plea to young people on the continent and around the globe to write letters where they express their views to Madiba on what kind of world to live in, this in line with his principles. All the letters can be sent to the South African embassies around the world and will later be compiled into a book which will form part of the Madiba centenary. Hatang spoke to our foreign editor, Me Sophie Mokwena.
We're saying to children out there, they must write in their mother tongue. And we will then translate it into English, and the translated version will be on the same page as the original letter. Madiba always said that when you want to reach people, use their mother tongue because you reach their hearts. And that's what we then are going to do. Look at this letter, for example, writing to Me Lilian Ngoyi. He starts off the letter writing, Khaitsedi yaka ya ratehang. He didn't know much Sesotho to write in much Sesotho, but he started off like that. And he would start off by talking about education and other parts of what he would have written to them about, but also to inquire about their children, how their children are doing, whether they are doing well in terms of their education out there. So our request to young people, particularly those on the continent, is that we'd like you to write letters to Madiba. We have a book that we'll be publishing at the end of the year as part of the centenary, where we're urging young people, the children, in a book that's called Children's Letters to Madiba, in which children will be reflecting on their world without Madiba. We know that most of them would have been born when Madiba was already too old. They hadn't had any kind of interaction with him, but we know that they knew about his presence.
Well, for all those children who would actually like to participate, don't forget to send letters to the South African embassies in your respective countries. And let's continue now with some African news. Zimbabwe will soon see the launch of the new political party. This comes after those who supported President Robert Mugabe were purged from ZANU-PF. The former veteran leader has recently expressed his anger in what he calls a clear coup that was meted against his administration. Well, these new developments are likely to heighten tensions as the country prepares to go to the polls this year later.
No, President Mugabe is not part of our executive, but he is welcome to be our supporter, and he has told us that if we do certain things that he considers fundamental, he is going to be our supporter. So we are working very hard that we do those things and that we can have him as one of the millions supporters that we are targeting. Mind you, there are 5.3 registered voters, and he was the first person to be registered. So it will be an honor, really, to have him as one of our supporters. We are going to field the presidential candidate, and we are going to field 210 parliamentary candidates, and we are going to field 1,958 council ward contestants. So we will take part in every contested seat in this country, and we are prepared to win.
Well, thousands took to the streets of Conakry in Guinea, protesting against the ongoing closure of public schools and calling for the resignation of President Alpha Condé. Well, tensions have risen in the West African country following disputed local elections last month. Guinea's main opposition parties are calling for the publication of results from the local elections, which allies of President Condé say they have won. In the district of Khalum, in the centre of Conakry, youth erected roadblocks and set tyres on fire. They are calling for public schools to reopen following an ongoing teachers' strike that has crippled the education sector since last year. The talks between Condé and the teachers' union failed in February. Analysts say escalating violence is linked to opposition fears that President Condé may seek to change the constitution to seek a third term in the 2020 elections. The United Nations warns that over 7 million people in South Sudan could become severely food insecure in the coming months unless aid is urgently provided. Many who are on the brink of starvation are surviving on weeds and water lilies. The crisis has been fueled by conflict that broke out in the country in 2013.
The World Food Programme has warned that without assistance, as of May this year, more than 1.3 million children under 5 will be at risk of acute malnutrition. Agencies say South Sudan is close to another famine after more than 4 years of civil war and failed ceasefires in the world's youngest nation. They warn that more people could be pushed into severe hunger and famine-like conditions between May and July unless assistance and access to people who need aid are maintained. The report comes 1 year after famine was declared in parts of South Sudan in February 2017.
Conflict in South Sudan has been going on for quite a long time. The last spike was in 2014, but still we're getting about 1,000 people coming in every month. When they arrive here, the World Food Programme is giving them a hot meal before they get allocated a piece of land, where they continue receiving food rations as well as cash transfers from the World Food Programme.
Oil-rich South Sudan plunged into civil war in 2013 after President Salva Kiir fired his deputy Riek Machar. Since then, fighting has fractured the country along ethnic lines. Inflation has sharply increased, and war and drought have paralyzed agriculture. About 4 million South Sudanese have been forced to flee their homes. Nearly 1.9 million are internally displaced, and about 2.1 million have fled to neighboring countries. At the peak of its response this year, the World Food Programme aims to reach 4.4 million people with life-saving food and nutrition assistance.
Well, the African Peer Review Mechanism, Africa's self-assessment instrument on matters governance, meets in the Rwandan capital Kigali this week to mark 15 years since its inception and also to review the tools used in the assessment process. The APRM currently has 37 members, 17 of which have gone through the review process by their peers. Indeed, for more on this, we'll be crossing to our East African correspondent, Sarah Kimani.
We talk about governance, we talk about it under.
Let's cross over to our East African correspondent for SABC News, Sarah Kimani. Very good morning to you, Sarah. Please tell us more about the African Peer Review Mechanism. Unfortunately, losing signal with Sarah. We'll move on. We will give you more updates on that Africa Peer Review Mechanism as and when it comes in, when we cross to our report on the ground. But the World Health Organization says that Nigeria's Lassa fever outbreak has spread to 18 states and affected more people this year than in the whole of 2017. Well, an outbreak of the Lassa fever, a viral illness, has killed 110 people this year in Africa's most populous nation in an unprecedented outbreak that has hit 18 of Nigeria's 36 states. This is according to the World Health Organization. Lassa fever is mainly transmitted to humans via contact with food or household items contaminated with rodent urine or excrement. Symptoms of the virus, which can also be passed between people through bodily fluids of those infected, include fever, headaches, and in the most severe cases, death. Staying with international news, sick and injured civilians left a rebel enclave in Syria's eastern Ghouta yesterday as part of the first medical evacuation since a massive assault on the area began nearly a month ago. Well, Syrian government forces have captured swathes of eastern Ghouta, a pocket of satellite towns and farmland, splintering it into 3 separate zones in recent days. For months, the United Nations has pleaded with authorities to allow the evacuation of hundreds of patients, including children with cancer. The Ghouta enclave is home to nearly 400,000 people under army siege since 2013 without enough food, water or medicine. This is according to the World Body. Of course, staying with the international news or news abroad, here on the continent, we'll cross to our East African correspondent, Sarah Kimbani. Of course, she is ready now. We've managed to get that signal. Very good morning to you, Sarah. Please tell us more about the African Peer Review Mechanism program that is currently taking place in Rwanda.
Well, the Africa Peer Review Mechanism is holding a meeting here in Kigali, Rwanda, and they're just here to discuss about instruments that they can use to be able to gauge governments and to be able to help governments assess themselves. Because, as you know, African governments under the African Peer Review Mechanism are supposed to use various instruments to review themselves and to assess themselves in terms of good governance issues. And so I am joined now by Professor Eddie Maloka, who is the Chief Executive Officer of APRM, to just take us through exactly what this meeting is about and what methodologies they are discussing. Just take us through this meeting, Professor, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
What should we expect out of this meeting?
Look, this is a technical meeting. We're looking at our instruments like we're expecting, you were explaining. We have statutory meetings which deal with policy, where we have ministers, presidents meeting. But here is a meeting of technical experts. But we do have our member states. Some of our ministers are here, national governing councils. So we're looking at how we conduct these reviews. We look yesterday we looked at the 2 missions we conducted yesterday. We look at Liberia, we look at Uganda, what went wrong, what are the lessons learned, how do we improve, and there were some suggestions that were made. We're looking at the questionnaire, we're looking at improving our other aspects of our work, also looking at introducing other products. Instead of waiting for one big review, maybe we even do targeted reviews which maybe look at how a country is conducting itself in this specific area. And so what will come out of here, it will go to our governments, and then our governments will then look at them and then they adopt. But once they adopt, then we are the ones who are going to work with them in the implementation.
Tell me, a lot of people know APRM as a program of African heads of states to review themselves, to look inward. How has it been received? It's 15 years tomorrow. Are African governments looking inward? Are they willing to be reviewed by their peers?
Well, it varies from country to country, but we are very fortunate that the current president of the APRM, who's the president of Chad, President Idriss Déby, he's of that view. He said to me 2 things. One is that he wants to challenge his peers to be much more rigorous and more direct in talking to each other about issues that come out of the reports concerning their countries. So it's something that we're discussing it here, and now we're going to work out the modality. So we're expecting that in the near future, the APRM, the leaders will be able to say, my brother, here you are doing right, but here, can we not talk about this? And so the other thing is that he said to me, look, APRM reports are owned by leaders. They are leaders' reports, and because they are for leaders. But why must they be confined to leaders? Let's take them down to our people. Let them be owned by our people. So you hear that one of the things that we are doing is to see how we can have a more rigorous civil society involvement, very deep in civil society involvement in the post-review, in the reports, and so because we only involve civil society mainly when we do the reviews, when we are in countries where we involve them. It's a requirement. They are interviewed, they participate, they part in the validation. But once the report is out, you publish it, it's there, the leaders own it. But we don't do enough. And that's really what he has challenged us to do, so that people can own the reports, can use the reports, even for advocacy.
It's been 15 years. It is a voluntary organization, but just 37 out of 54 countries are members. Even worse, only 17 have been assessed during this period. Would you say that really leaders are ready to look inward, or they want to be members of such an organization that actually holds them to account?
No, of course. Now what they have done over the last 2 years or so, they have now accepted the principle of universal accession to say all of us must be members. But at the same time, they insist, don't be a member when you are not ready, because when you are a member, you take additional responsibilities, you are always making additional commitments, you are saying, I'm opening myself to be assessed by my colleagues. So when you are not ready, let's work together. But what we are also introducing now, which is President Idris Deby is now writing a letter to his colleagues in Central Africa, is that even countries that are not ready for fully fledged, let's have national seminars on governance, on APRM, because you have to know the APRM, it's important that it's not seen as an oppositional, as a process intended with the intention to embarrass a government, or to cause friction, to cause fight, but it's supposed to build, it's supposed to assist the dialogue, to get the country to talk, to get the country to improve, so that's what we have to do. But it's not an easy thing, because it has a lot of, it depends a lot on trust and political will. So these things vary from country to country, but I can tell you the political will there is very, very massive. And we are happy we're in Kigali, because President Kagame has given the APRM additional responsibilities, currently as the chair of the AU, but also in his other capacity as the head of APRM, the reforms of the African Union, to say the APRM must now track governance in Africa. And that's what we are working on. It's a new responsibility. So we'll track governance, even including non-members. So we'll be able, from next year, want to unveil the first report that says this is the state of governance, these are the challenges, these are the areas, and then we make some proposals to heads of state as to how then the countries, then will then assess how countries are even performing in that area.
Tomorrow, APRM finally turns 15. When you look back, any achievements that you can say in the last 15 years we achieved this as a continent, as a continental body?
I think getting Africa to accept that governance is a responsibility, it's not an external imposition, it's something we have to do, it's something that we have achieved. Because there was a time it was a very difficult topic. And then the second thing is getting the countries that we have reviewed to be reviewed, and the kind of dialogue that these reviews have generated in those countries is quite important. I was in Mali now, with a whole pack of people who were part of the APRM process. They were complaining that the APRM was here, they did the report, and they participate, and some of the things which were in our report, the challenges they will face later as a country were in the report, they were never taken up. So you have all these a very huge constituency of APRM in countries. Even in South Africa, you do have a very huge constituency. And then the third area, of course, where I think we have done very well is that, and we don't talk a lot about this, is that in the APRM reports, there are countries that have taken them up very seriously, like here in Rwanda. They took the APRM report and then mainstream it into their national development plan. So there are countries that have passed legislation, that have introduced programs, that have decentralized, that out of the APRM recommendations.
Indeed, thank you very much for having you. We wish you well tomorrow as you mark 15 years.
Thank you very much.
We've been speaking to Professor Eddie Maloka, the Chief Executive Officer of APRM. Tomorrow, APRM turns 15. We will still be focusing on him and asking him, holding him to account. Has he been able to deliver for APRM? Has APRM delivered for the continent, which still has serious governance issues? We will be speaking to you tomorrow. Thank you for joining us. Bye for now.
Thank you very much, Sarah Kamani, East African correspondent for SABC News. That's a wrap-up of your news, at least for now. Let's cross over to the sporting desk with Valen Kirtley.
Thank you very much, Shante. Well, lots of football overnight, and we start here at home in South Africa. Mamelodi Sundowns, they're through to the quarterfinals of the Nedbank Cup. The PSL log leaders didn't dictate matters, however, against third division team ECBs. The team from Bisho grabbed the lead against the run of play when a poor clearance by Siyabonga Zulu landed straight to Joseph Chikile.
It's Mtule, it's Bees with a shot lead here inside 15. Now, lovely play, super goalkeeping, super.
The Bees held on to their lead into the second half after a great performance from their keeper, Kanya Mini, who won man of the match. A minute into the second half, however, the hosts, through their captain, drew level.
Bang! Nice and early in the first. It's Lumper R-E-S-P-E-C-T.
And while January signing Jeremy Brockie is yet to find the back of the net for his new club, he teed up Tapelo Morena to score the winner. There is one more round of 16 matchup between Cape Town City and Orlando Pirates, which will take place tonight.
Just needs the touch off of Mini into the back of the net, and Sundowns lead for the first time this evening.
Moving on to European football now. Wissam Ben Yedder scored twice in quick succession to earn Sevilla a 2-1 win against Manchester United and a place in the quarterfinals of Europe's elite club competition, the UEFA Champions League. Wissam Ben Yedder broke the deadlock with a clinical finish just minutes after coming off the bench.
Sarabia, Ben Yedder! It's a wonderful finish, and the substitute has done his job here for Sevilla.
And then he went one better. He squeezed a header past David De Gea and under the crossbar moments later.
It's come back out. Has it gone in? Yes, it has. It's Ben Yedder again who celebrates the goal.
Romelu Lukaku pulled one back for the hosts, but it was too late.
Rashford and thumped on by Lukaku. Seconds are ticking away. Manchester United know that they need another two.
Meanwhile, Roma reached the quarterfinals for the first time in 10 years, and Zeko's strike against Shakhtar Donetsk put Roma through on away goals as the match ended 1-0, and Roma progressed to 2 after a 2-2 aggregate. Bafana coach Stuart Baxter has made 14 changes to the squad that last featured against Senegal last November in a 2018 FIFA World Cup qualifier. The Scot has brought in a number of young players to the national team. He will use the upcoming Four Nations tournament in Zambia to assess them as he increases his pool of players for the future.
Those of Kaizer Chiefs and Sipesihle Ndlovu of Maritzburg United are completely new to the national setup. He has also brought in players that recently played at the Under-20 World Cup. A number of others have played in the COSAFA Cup.
We need to fulfill more than one goal this year. We need to go through the squad. We need to be brave enough to renew it and give some of the youngsters their head. We need to have a good qualifying campaign in AFCON that takes this group of players to a major tournament to give them the experience there that will allow them to run a good campaign for the next World Cup.
Orlando Pirates assistant coach Rulani Mokoena has been roped in as part of the technical team.
Yes, he does have ambitions, and I would like to think that, yes, he can learn from the experience. So it's about development on all fronts, and I think it's something that we shouldn't just look at as being, well, it's a nice to have. I think it's a must have.
Baxter says it was a challenge to select this squad as there are players who were overlooked but also deserve to be in the team. Bafana will play 2 matches at the tournament, with their first opponent being Angola. Lebantube, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And finally, former referee and Premier Soccer League General Manager Ace Ngobo has called on FIFA to place the South African Football Association under administration. The only individual challenging for the presidency of the National Federation says under the leadership of Danny O'Dan and his CEO Dennis Mumble, SAFA has broken almost all its statutes and that of FIFA. Ngobo has warned that if FIFA fails to dissolve the SAFA leadership, it will be forced to take football's world governing body to court.
He says they have written to FIFA telling World Football's governing body that the SAFA statutes are continually broken or ignored and now wait the Federation's response, failing which he will take this matter to the highest court in the land.
When we deal with the matter of the courts, if we go the route of an interdict, we will be interdicting FIFA, forcing them legally to implement sections G1, G2 and G3, which obligate them to intervene and place an FA under administration.
He also questioned SAFA's finances and the involvement of KPMG.
Does this perhaps lend credence to the allegations that SAFA has been doctoring its financials and KPMG complicit in covering that up? It's a question. Because you can't declare a profit of 23 million rands, and yet as we sit here, for 9 months, the regional monthly grants have not been paid.
Ngobo also revealed that KPMG has since terminated its contract, leaving the SAFA's Legacy Trust without an auditor. Tambashiba, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And that concludes your sports in this hour here on Newsroom. Phil is standing by to bring you your weather.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vay. Let's take a look at exactly what's going on in terms of our weather today. And first of all, we're going to start out with some fantastic news, which is rainfall forecast for Cape Town today. Now, we're seeing a low pressure, which is bringing in a cold front over the course of the next few days. It's approaching today, and this afternoon and evening, it's going to bring about isolated showers to that southwest. We're also expecting quite a bit of rainfall in South Africa's central and central eastern regions. So take a look at that. It develops as we progress through the day, primarily in the afternoon and evening. And then by tomorrow, we're going to see that rainfall starting to shift along that southern coastline. And once again, as we move into tomorrow's midday and afternoon, and of course the evening as well, we're going to see that rainfall linking up through Botswana again, through South Africa's eastern coastlines as well. So let's take a look at exactly what's going on for today. Midweek, we're seeing a 22-degree high forecast for Cape Town today, and rainfall. What fantastic news it is. And yes, we are 2 weeks into autumn already, so there you go. We're starting to see those cold fronts coming through. We're also expecting wet weather in parts of the eastern regions of the country. Now, we are expecting Bloemfontein to see some afternoon and evening showers. We're also expecting a 32-degree high there. Temperatures of 30 degrees forecast for Windhoek, 34 for Gaborone, and 27 for Harare. Now, as we move to the island regions, we're going to see the cloud cover starting to intensify. Now, over the next few days, we're going to see a strong low-pressure system just moving towards Madagascar's east coast there, and that is going to bring in a lot of rainfall. So please be very aware of this, not only in Madagascar, but the surrounding island regions as well. Nairobi's at 23 degrees for today, 33-degree high forecast for Dar es Salaam. It's going to be a hot one there, but a drier one. We are seeing rainfall all the way through from Mombasa to towards Kigali, linking up with rainfall that's also forecast towards Bangui, Yaoundé, Libreville, Kinshasa, Brazzaville. All of these areas expecting temperatures rather warm there. Bangui's at 39 degrees, so a hot one. And with that wet weather, we're seeing some very, very high humidity factors coming into play today, which is going to make it feel even hotter. Now, as we progress into the spring season for the northern hemisphere, we're going to start seeing less and less rainfall in that far northern region. And today is no exception. Very little rainfall, if any at all, over that northern coastline. But the rainfall for both today and tomorrow is focused on the southern coastline of West Africa. Now, this is where we're going to leave your weather for now. Stay with us here, though, on the SABC.
Violence against women, it also talks to such behavior where teachers, instead of educating kids and give them dignity, they strip them of their dignity.
The First Lady.
The First Lady, her action, it's just unacceptable. I must say that it cannot be condoned. If I had it my way, I would say we had to act and make sure that he goes to jail.
This scourge is not ceasing.
The angry people, the intolerant, it's so huge. So then the scourge finds itself within that particular environment. You cannot say that it's a standalone. It's influenced by social ills, economic challenges.
Join me in Port Sedu live every Monday to Thursday at 17:30.
No. Yes. Yes.
Sports Live every Saturday and Sunday at 7:30 p.m.
The Parliament's Mineral Resources Committee is expected to discuss terms of reference on allegations of state capture. Do they or do they not have a viable contingency plan for the payment of social grants come the 1st of April? The Lassa answers to Parliament this morning. The world mourns the death of Britain's most famous modern-day scientist, Stephen Hawking, who's died aged 76.
And Mamelodi Sundowns join the 6 other PSL teams in the quarterfinals, but they have a little trouble removing the ECB's sting as they come from a goal down to beat the 3rd Division team 2-1.
Very good morning to you. Welcome to SABC's Newsroom. Just gone 10 o'clock. I'm Shante Yankees. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm not alone. Standing by with all your sporting highlights leading us up until 12 p.m. is Valen Kirtley. Very good morning to you, Valen. You good? Sporting-wise, what are we expecting?
Shante, thank you very much. Very good morning to you and very good morning to all of our viewers. Excitement last night when it comes to football, both here in South Africa as well as abroad with UEFA Champions League. In the UEFA Champions League, it's Sevilla who surprised Manchester United and Roma go through after beating Shakhtar Donetsk on away goals. All that and so much more to look forward to on your sport, which comes at about 10 to the hour here on Newsroom.
Your lead story at the top of the hour, the Mineral Resources Portfolio Committee will today discuss the terms of reference for its own inquiry into allegations of state capture against former Mineral Resources Minister Mosebenzi Zwane. Well, the former Mineral Resource Minister missed a number of opportunities to explain his involvement to the committee before he was removed from cabinet last month. Zwane is accused of facilitating a controversial sale of Optimum Mine from Glencore to Gupta-linked Trillion. Well, SASSA is today expected to give a progress report in Parliament. This relates to the last year's constitutional court order. The order paved way for a new grants payment provider by the 1st of the next month. Well, SASSA's acting CEO says that the announced contingency plan to manage the cash component of the social grant system, where the Constitutional Court denied an extension of invalid CPS contract, is only a work in progress. The Constitutional Court last week demanded that both SASSA and the South African Post Office clarify the contingency measures put into place to deal with the payments of social grants. Well, Gauteng authorities have confirmed that mortuary workers have embarked on another work-to-rule strike since last week, Wednesday. The unprotracted strike started with workers reporting for duty but refusing to perform post-mortems. Officials have acknowledged that there is a backlog at some state mortuaries in the province. Acting Chief Director for Forensic Medical Services, Medupi Modisane, says when the workers went on strike last year, they were given the assurance that they would be trained and registered with the Health Council. Well, the ongoing strike by forensic pathology workers in Gauteng has put the brakes on the release of post-mortem results and burials. Striking workers have been given a final warning to resume their normal duties or to face disciplinary action, as they are in contradiction of the interdict judgment by the Labour Court in 2016. For more on the story, we are now joined by Dr. Medupi Modisane. He's the acting CEO for the Gauteng Forensic Pathology Services. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Essentially, why weren't the employees' grievances addressed earlier?
The grievances are being addressed. The only outstanding issue is the training, and unfortunately the process took longer because the registration with the statutory body, the Health Professions Council, is a very involved process. The regulations have been developed for the opening of the registers for the forensic pathology officers, which means they can now register with the council. But the next step would then be to start the training program, which is a process. The agreement at the bargaining council was that within 6 months the register would be opened. Unfortunately, it took longer than 6 months, but it is.
So you said that the grievances are being solved, but it seems as though employees are taking to strike. They've been striking since last week, Wednesday. What are their grievances, upon your understanding?
The grievance is the training issue. The officers have been complaining that since the service was started, they have been trained only on the job. There is no formal qualification, and this is the process of actually professionalizing the profession.
I think one of the main issues here around the story has been how does a company take on people that do not necessarily have the right qualifications to perform the duties of that job description?
The issue is that remember the postmortems, the forensic postmortems were a function of the South African Police Service, not even health, until 2006 when health took over. So over the years, the training has always been on the job for forensic officers to assist the doctors who actually perform the postmortems. And the officers are saying they actually need a formal qualification. The standard of postmortems have been excellent over the years because of the on-job training that has been the norm. And we agree with the officers that we need to develop a formal qualification for them, and hence the involvement of Health Professions Council to develop that.
And can you give us any information now as the employees are on strike? What's happening, if there is, to the backlog of the bodies?
The backlog is there, and as reported, it is true that Germiston is the most affected. Firstly, because of its size, it's the second biggest forensic mortuary in the province, and it's only at Germiston where the strike has been 100% observed, meaning all officers are on strike. Not single post-mortem has been done during the strike. We have tried to implement contingency plans to assist the bereaved families to get their loved ones by asking facilities that are not fully on strike to assist with those. Unfortunately, as the strike happens, it escalates, other facilities also join. So few postmortems are being done at Germiston, but it's not at the level that a busy facility like that should be performing.
Now, what other support is being given to families? I mean, death is already something that's hard to deal with, and to know that your loved one is, being stored, you don't even know where your loved one is being stored or what's happened to the body. What other measures have been put in place in terms of liaising with the families and communicating with them?
The department is in constant contact with the families. They have our direct line. We deal with them every morning. We assess the situation and determine how many bodies can be done, and the families are communicated with for them to have an idea of when their loved ones will be released for burial, so that they can also prepare for funeral.
What is the contingency plan from here on out until the employees get that training that they said that they were going to be getting?
The contingency plan towards the training really is that the register is ready to be activated.
But at the moment, does that then mean that we would be having employees that are not necessarily qualified conducting those postmortems?
The point I'm making is that these people have been trained on the job, and they are very competent at what they do. The results of our postmortem speak for themselves. The only issue is that they want a formal qualification, which is what is the issue. So they are qualified to do the job. They have been trained. As I say, the service is more than 50 years old, and that's how it's functioned all these years. It's only now that, because the officers, and we agree with them, that it should be professionalized. So the training program would actually recognize the experience that most of them have. Some of them have done this job for more than 30 years, and they are very good at it.
All right, thank you very much for giving us more updates on that, on the Gauteng mortuary strike. That was Dr. Modesane giving us details there around the strike and the grievances shared by the employees. Moving on, organisers of a protest march dubbed a March Against False Prophets, scheduled for today in Johannesburg, says that the protest will go ahead even with the ongoing attempts by one charismatic church leader to interdict the aspects of the protest. Well, victims of false prophets and their supporters will hit the streets today as part of the Human Rights Month. The focal point of the march is to say enough is enough with regards to sexual abuses, rape, manipulations and deceptions which many Christians have experienced in the hands of false prophets. The protest march is organized under various themes and hashtags like hashtag sexual abuse, no deception, no manipulation. Earlier I spoke to the protest organizer Solomon Izang Ashoms.
A lot of people that have been living in pain because they've been hurt by false prophets within the church, leaders, apostles, bishops, you know, and the Bible is very clear that we're going to have false prophets in Matthew 24:24. But how do we deal with it? For us, we're not trying to exterminate false prophets because they're always going to be there. But how do we save and how do we support those who have been raped, those who have lost money, those who have been sexually abused? Some of the people protesting today, the girls, they have kids from a rape situation with a prophet, you know, and the prophet don't want to take responsibility. Some of them long time ago. There's a lady who was married and she has a baby. She was raped, you know, she had a husband, but she was raped by someone who was her spiritual father. So we're trying to say, look, enough is enough. The church has not done enough for me. I don't think we have the solution and say, look, this is how we should deal with it. So we're trying to say, from a legal perspective and from a church perspective, we need to do much more to be able to support them because people are really hurting. And that is what really, for us, that's what breaks our heart. And we just want to march just so their voices would be heard. Look, we're here. We need support. There are so many of them in churches and in our communities, and it's about time that we say something about it.
A very interesting view that you hold, and you know, religion is always a very contentious issue because it essentially comes down to what an individual believes. How then does one determine that you are a false prophet and you are a true prophet? Because it then becomes down to belief.
That's right. The Bible is very clear about it. If you go to the book of Ezekiel 13, the Bible is my yardstick. So whatever I say is from there. Ezekiel 13 from 1 to 16 is very explicit. You know, false prophets, you would see, they prophesy based on their own needs. They prophesy peace when there is tribulation. They prophesy just to suit your emotions. And we see a lot of that, you know. And you also have to look at the area of character. Sometimes we watch prophets on TV. We watch them from the pulpit. We watch them dress nice and they drive big cars or they have a congregation of 10,000. But that doesn't mean you're real. That's just a facade. That's just a brand that you've created. The thing is character. Do you have godly character? How do you treat your wife? How do you treat congregation? Are you prideful? So we have to investigate people that we follow. We don't just follow them because they're eloquent on TV or they know the word of God and they preach it. You know, I wouldn't tell anybody, like, you must follow this prophet because he's a true prophet or that prophet is a false prophet.
Well, that much-awaited SASA parliamentary hearing is taking place. Let's cross over now live.
They make their input. They will also state how long they have been acting. So let's allow that. No, you won't do it that but when you actually make your presentation, you will take us through about yourself, how long we have been there, you have been acting, etc. So we are satisfied for now. We will pass to the next person.
Good morning, honorable members and colleagues. My name is Brenda Sibeko. I'm from the National Department of Health, newly appointed DDG for Social Security. Good morning, Chair, members.
Please come closer to these mics. I think they are a little bit very flat.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, so that we can hear.
All right. Good morning, Chair, members, colleagues, and members of the public. My name is Busisiwe Mahloborwane, the head of legal services at SASA.
The head of? Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson and members of the committee, colleagues and officials. My name is Zanotho Lompeta, Acting Regional Manager, Eastern Cape.
Good morning, Chairperson, honorable members. My name is Paseka Letsatsi, Head of Communications at SASA.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, members of the committee, colleagues, and members of the public. My name is Abraham Mahlangu. I'm the Chief Information Officer at Head Office SASA.
Good morning, honorable members. My name is Tamba Matlo, the Regional Executive Manager, Gauteng.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Gideon Matebula, Acting Regional Executive Manager, Mpumalanga. Good morning, Honorable Chair and honorable members and colleagues. My name is Sibongile Sitlaba, Acting Regional Executive Manager in the Free State.
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson and members. My name is Busiso Ntangoti. I'm the Acting Regional Executive Manager, KwaZulu-Natal.
Good morning, members and the Honorable Chairperson. My name is Dan Sambamba. I am the Parliamentary Liaison Officer in the Ministry of Social Development.
Now then, I think we have exhausted those people who were supposed to introduce themselves. And then we will go straight to our business now. But I will make please switch off your mic, please. Next to Gauteng. Okay, thank you. I will make this comment that in the last meeting, we had a report, an interface with the internal audit committee of the head office. And then that is the reason why you are here, the member from the legal unit. I just want to make that so that you don't feel either not being a regional or, because we wanted to clarify a number of things with you in relation to the presentation of the chairperson and the CFO. So I appreciate that you are here today. They have really complied. But at the same time, your being here is also going to help us because sometimes there are legal issues. We really needed your support in relation to the presentations that are done by SASA head office. And then maybe when they go to Scopa or they go to the court, it's not, there seem to be a little bit of contradictions. But because you have been a legal person, and when these were discussed and the councillor being appointed, you also participate. But there is really an issue we would want to be addressed as to the last honorable member's presentation by SASA in preparation for court appearance, and how those who represent SASA, when we say our, it will always be referring to the department of SASA because that's our operational space. So you will be prepared to support us on that matter. But in order to be able not to be confusing, I would want to first allow a situation where the leader of the delegation makes the input in a way of introducing the state of readiness in the country for the D-Day, which is now just around the corner, to find how the national sees this happening, and also how the provinces, are they comfortable to go and hit the ground come the first, and how is the mood on the ground. We will be very keen to do that. So let me allow first, before I do that, there's an important item which sometimes cause a lot of tension and temperature. The apologies. So nowadays they are a very good, problematic area. Can we allow the secretary to do that and then allow the House to, I mean, the members of the portfolio committee to accept them? Thank you very much. I mean, to deal with them, not necessarily accept, because I don't know whether they will be acceptable. All right, can you be on the floor, Secretary?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I have few apologies that I've received, written ones. One is from the Minister, Honorable Shabangu, who went with us today. She attended the cabinet meeting where she's required to report on the SASA matter. And another one is from the Deputy Minister. She's out of country in Zimbabwe, and she also attached a letter from the Chief Whip where she was given permission to attend. It's a JICA, it's Japan International Cooperation Agency. There's a partnership on disability mainstream project, so she's away on that. Another one is from Honorable Mohotsi, who had an emergency, a family emergency, so she's away home. Another one from Honorable Dudley, she has a meeting outside Parliament. There's another, the standing one is from Honorable Sondi. I believe that past 2 weeks, her son was hospitalized, so the son is still not yet recovered, so she's still away. So those are the apologies I've received, Chairperson. Thank you.
Can I put them to the honorable members so that they engage with that? The apologies, that maybe I might make an emphasis that the minister did phone when we were right in the meeting together with the honorable members that were there to say these matters require a cabinet and the IMC intervention. So they will be in that process and won't be with us. And she can't join us at a later stage because they will still be continuing with the IMC meeting. So I'm trying to say she did not only write, but she tried to verbally communicate so that I can understand and make our members know why she's not here. Honorable Malkhas, and then Honorable Masango.
Thanks a lot. I'll accept the apologies as given today, and we noted what the Deputy Minister had to say. Thank you.
Honorable Masango?
No, Chair, it was to accept the apologies and appreciate the fact that the Deputy Minister actually apologizes in writing. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And then we are now through with that. But that item which I had put forward and then was withdrawn a little bit, we can go back and grab something. It has arrived now. So that we can having a working something. I do know for a fact that some media houses sometimes report that we are all about food. But I would actually assure them that when the members come in this meeting, they are already from other meetings. And if we have to give them time to go, and it will then, they sacrifice to have a working lunch, because even from here, they are going straight to the house, and from the house straight to the other meetings. So they are the people who have no allocation of time to eat. So those who are skeptical about a working lunch, they will go to the past where we had all the time in our hands. So can I allow members to pick something and plus minus 4 minutes or 5, please?
Thanks for that, Chairperson. Because I've been talking over beyond that too. It's yes. Yes.
Mabacha kaloku. Hello. Mabacha. Andizokwazi ukutya. I'll go on. Yes, you are. Okay. I'll see. Something. Uba ndisele into endizoba right. We are alive. Why, Kanye? We are alive. Oh. Oh. Hey, can you see this? Can you see this? That honorable member. That honorable member choosing to greet KZN.
A parliamentary hearing into Lassa seems to be taking a break. We will be crossing back or giving you at least updates from that hearing throughout the course of the morning. Well, moving on, British theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking has died at the age of 76. The UK Pressmen Associated reported this yesterday. Well, Hawking sought to explain some of the most complicated questions of life while himself working under the shadow of a likely premature death. His formidable mind probed the very limits of human understanding, both in the vastness of space and in the bizarre submolecular world of quantum theory, which he said could predict what happens at the beginning and the end of time. His work ranged from the origins of the universe itself through the tantalizing prospect of time travel to the mysteries of the all spaces consuming black holes. Well, Hawking continued to practice work in theoretical physics throughout the rest of his life, helping to launch projects to find intelligent extraterrestrial life and contributing to a range of scientific prizes and research. Meanwhile, Minister of Higher Education, Naledi Pandor, has paid tribute to Hawking, describing him as an inspiration. Pandor was speaking earlier on SABC News.
For me, what he represented was an example of the ingenuity of human beings, and also he managed to tell us to get rid of the many prejudices that we have about persons who have disabilities, because he proved beyond doubt that talent exists everywhere.
Let's take a short break here on SABC Newsroom. Do stay tuned.
A warm welcome to one of your favorite weekly review analysis programs, Media Monitor. So let's look at the race itself.
It's just becoming a personality contest where people just want somebody to guard their own vested interest. And I feel that the country is at a point now where we need some sort of change.
It is ANC policy that they will have to implement.
We fairly know the direction the ANC wants to take. As a leader, you have to implement.
So what was it like on the ground in Kenya?
Well, the country is divided. The country is very divided.
I think within the country, for me, the one person that I criticize severely, and I'm not very happy with his approach, is Raila Odinga, with him pulling out.
Stay tuned to Media Monitor and catch on analysts unpacking top stories every Sunday from 9 a.m.
A very good morning to you, and thank you so much indeed for choosing Morning Live.
But I want to know the basic thing.
Griselda Lewis, SABC News, in Parktown, Johannesburg.
Zimbabwe, Mzondeli Mbeje, SABC News, Luanda, Angola.
Let's take a look at your market indicators.
Thanks for staying with Morning Live. Let's bring you your sports news.
Let's take a look at your satellite image.
Set the agenda for the day with Morning Live.
The United Nations warns that over 7 million people in South Sudan could become severely food insecure in the coming months unless aid is urgently provided. Mixed reaction to the firing of United States Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. Thousands take to the streets of Conakry in Guinea, protesting against the ongoing closure of public schools and calling for the resignation of President Alpha Condé. Your top story at the half of the hour. Stories of violence, assault and sexual misconduct in our schools continue to hog the headlines. On Tuesday, it emerged that 2 of the pupils that were sexually assaulted in a primary school in Soweto last year were also sexually assaulted by an investigating officer on the case. Well, this is the latest development, and it's coming a few days after video of a Three Rivers secondary school student has been seen throwing a book at her teacher, and that circulated on social media, and that incident has also been widely condemned. Another student-teacher assault case was also reported in the Northwest yesterday. To help unpack the latest developments, we welcome Secretary General. We welcome Mr. Steve Mabona, a spokesperson from the department. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Essentially, your initial reaction to not only the sexual assault that we're seeing at schools, but the violence.
It's quite sad, but the sexual assault, it's quite, concerning for us. We are dismayed, of the incident, because someone that is entrusted, of the safety of the learners, there's an allegation that there's molested the victims. You'll understand that now this will be a double blow because these are the victims of the last year incident, and now the police officer. It's quite sad, and the violence that is happening around our schooling environment is quite concerning. When you look at the learner misconduct that happened in the Sidibeng, it's quite concerning. Hence, we put an emphasis that learners must remember that when they go to school, what is paramount is for them to learn, and the teachers will then be focusing on teaching. Hence, it's important for teachers to also acknowledge that we're living in a different era now, one might put it that way. An emphasis to parents when they facilitate the process of crafting your code of conduct, they need to understand that we must be in a position to make sure that our children are not ill-disciplined. But that one of sexual assault, it's quite it's a drawback for us as a department, and we have actually unleashed our social services to go to the school, conduct counseling. They've been there since this morning, and we hope that the law will take its course. The police have already started doing some work on the case that has been reported by the parents at the police station yesterday.
This seems to be quite concerning around the security of children. We've seen that, or we know that, if you become a teacher, there's certain security measures that you have to go through in actually being able to become a teacher. So with that being said, are there going to be new rules or contingencies introduced now in investigating officers going into schools that are supposed to be there to resolve issues?
Look,
is that something that the department
look, it's quite sad. I mean, when you look at this case, we're talking here the senior, ranking official. We're talking someone who's experienced in the field, and it's quite concerning that we actually said the police entrusted the senior, team. Those are senior. Those are not lower ranking officials that are investigating this matter. And hence it was shocking for us as a department to say we are actually awaiting for the case to go on trial. The next appearance is on the 11th of April. So we were hoping that the finalization thereof of the investigation by the officers will be fast-tracked so that when the perpetrator appear, will be in a better position to have a winnable case. So we will say, when we look at the safety of our learners, there's a lot of work that has been done in the schooling environment. Coming from the patrollers, we said all patrollers will be vetted. We won't have a patroller that we don't know their background. Hence, we said the community safety must take that responsibility. We gave them that responsibility to say appoint and make sure that you vet, because you work with the police, make sure that we have credible people around us, making sure that we don't compromise safety of our learners. We work very closely with SGBs, and we have said there must be a teacher that is appointed as a liaison officer, one might put it that way, of sexual assault cases. If learners feel that they are abused, they need to interact with that teacher, who will be then working with the department and all the other professionals. So we did a lot. I mean, we met with the principals, put an emphasis on how to manage all sexual assault cases, and we were satisfied that the inroads that we've made, they are yielding results.
You know, just like having a look at the other video that was doing the rounds on social media, we've been focusing on the issues that have been affecting the children. Let's have a look at how the teachers and the circumstances that they have to go under, and you know, some of the behavior that they receive on the other hand from children. What is the department doing also to combat the issues coming in from the teachers' sides?
Look, our safety policy protect everyone, protect a learner and an educator and SGB members that are going to the school. Hence, there's a team that is looking, you know, towards making sure that the safety of all the stakeholders at school is upheld. Hence, the implementation of the policy, they must make sure that if there's an incident, they liaise with the police to come on the ground. If there's any emergency that happens, you know, during contact time or even outside contact time, they know what to do. Hence, we will normally put an emphasis that the parent body need to, you know, work with us to make sure that we change the behavior of our learners. We can't say an educator is afraid that a learner will slap him or her, the learner will assault an educator. It's unheard of. That's learner misconduct which we cannot tolerate. And hence we put an emphasis that when you look at our code of conduct across the school environment, we need to amend some of them that are lenient towards misconduct, make sure that we tighten them up, because we know that educators, they have a council that is responsible, you know, for them. They know, they have their ethics, they know how to conduct themselves. If they misconduct themselves, they know that the department will be empowered to deal with them decisively. So we will appeal to parents to work with us and make sure that we don't have ill discipline in our schooling environment.
Thank you very much for your time this morning, Mr. Steve Mabona, of course, Gauteng Department spokesperson, on some of the shocking news there coming in. An official investigating the case of sexual assault within a school has actually been linked and charged possibly to also conducting sexual assault with those affected learners in that case. Speaking to the department there, their views on that, as well as violence from both the children and teachers in school. Let's move on. Let's have a look at our question of the day that we're asking this morning, and it is, what do you consider a false prophet? We had a very interesting interview earlier on here on SABC Newsroom. Let's have a look at some of those tweets on Twitterville this morning as to what people consider. A Black Boy's Dream on Twitter says, well, false prophets are those that seek fame and fortune. Their gifts are used to feed their needs and neglect those that need help the most. Babilo says, only if God can show you emotionally, #tag false prophets should be finished. Definitely. Our poll that we're running today is, as society, are we doing enough to protect our children? Also in conversation with the Gauteng Education spokesperson Steve Mabona on one of those issues related to that. Well, Nazim says we are not doing enough as parents, and community we need to change. #child protection. And Nkonzo says we are not doing enough as a community, and we need to work together as a community to protect our children. Okay, let's have a look at what's making headlines front page and centre on our continent this morning. And we'll start off here at home in South Africa. The Sowetan reports that a police officer tasked with investigating allegations of sexual abuse at a Soweto school allegedly forced 2 of the 87 victims to undress in a classroom and molested them. To Namibia, the Namibian reports that veteran Namibian politician Nora Skimming Chase has died after a long battle with cancer. And finally, in Swaziland, the Swaziland Observer reports that the expectant women residing in Mbabane and outskirts will have to bear with inconvenience for at least a week before seeking help at the Mbabane Government Hospital maternity ward, where renovations at the labour ward are underway. And of course, let's cross to the SASA hearing on parliamentary, or rather in the parliamentary committee. Let's cross back to that. We have been covering it live this morning.
CPS has always done for us. And in fact, today we enroll the first SASA official on the system. And then we will be rolling it out. So there has been progress made with that one as well. We are still looking at alternative pay point or alternative payment channels, particularly looking at cooperative banks or cooperative financial institutions to try and see how we can expand the payment network by using locally based either merchants or cooperative financial institutions, and then taking responsibility for reconciliations, because we now are going to be having multiple payment files instead of a single payment file that goes to one service provider. Just as far as the direct transfers, which we call ACB transfers, these are the direct deposits that are paid into personal bank accounts. As reported previously to this committee, we started with the testing for the January payment cycle. That went well, and in February and in March we have paid in directly, and I will show you the banks that we have deposited directly into. We also did a pilot project with the February payment cycle to pay directly into 100,000, and Chairperson, I do want to apologize, on the document that you've got it says 100 million. We do not have 100 million beneficiaries, so my sincere apologies. It's 100,000 SASA card accounts. They come out of the 5.7 million who transact in the national payment system, but we were wanting to make sure that we would be able to do the direct deposits, and that pilot has gone successfully. We were able to deposit the money into the accounts, people were able to access their money. So it opens the door for us to go ahead and do the direct deposits for the remaining 5.7 million. The 5.7 million people are the ones who will be ultimately migrated to the new SASA SAPO card in terms of the agreement that we have signed. However, these people still have the choice to choose to have money paid into their personal bank accounts if that is what they want, and there is a process for them to inform SASA, and then we will do that deposit. One of the concerns that we did want to raise to the committee is that CPS, our intention is to deposit directly into the 5.7 million accounts from March, but CPS has raised and understand that although these are Grindrod bank accounts, the technology that underpins them is provided by Net1, which is the holding company of CPS. Now, CPS has alerted us to the fact that if we were to do all 5.7 million in 1 month, that we may be introducing a systemic risk into the transfers. So we are engaging with them as well as with the Reserve Bank to see how this risk can be addressed, so that it does not impact in any way on the beneficiaries. So it is something that we are working with at this stage. The next few slides just indicates for March the number of direct transfers that happened according to the various banks. And you'll see that the spread of bank is quite large. We have a number of people really that have accounts in all of the banks. Also to say that with the media reports about VBS Mutual Bank, where we've got 155 beneficiaries who get their money being placed under curatorship, we actually did approach the Banking Association just to make sure that that was not going to pose a threat to the beneficiaries who do have accounts there, and we've been assured that they are watching the situation very closely and that there is no threat whatsoever to our beneficiaries. So in total for March, we deposited money for 2.3 million accounts, and that was for 2.6 billion rand, which has already been taken out of the CPS responsibility. As far as Regulation 26A deductions, and as I said, these are for the funeral policy premiums, we've been managing that since the beginning of March, and currently there are 727,243 deductions. that come off 702,000 beneficiaries. The value of this is just over 68 million, very nearly 69 million rand. Now, when we started working with this, we picked up some anomalies. Of the 727,000, 678,000 are perfectly fine. They are within the legislated requirements, which is one deduction per person, and that cannot exceed 10% of the value of the grant. There are smaller numbers, the 23,317 and 8, respectively, where there are multiple policies being deducted for. We are sorting this out with the insurance companies as well as directly with the beneficiaries who are affected to say to them that in terms of the legislation, we can only allow one deduction. Please tell us which one is the beneficiary you want to keep, and you then need to make the arrangements yourself for how you pay for the others if you want to keep them, or you engage with your insurance company if you want to cancel them. There are also, within that number, 3,351, which are for more than 10% of the value of the grant. And of great concern is that 16 of them is where the deduction is actually for more than 30% of the value of the grant. Now, what happened was that the deductions were calculated on the total amount that a beneficiary received rather than the value of the single grant, which is allowed in legislation. So all of these exceptions are being cleaned up, and we've given the insurance companies a deadline to say that if you do not engage with your policy holder and help us clean this up, then we're not going to allow you access to the deduction facility. So it is something that is being managed within very tight time frames. As far as the biometric enrollment is concerned, which is the next one that SASSA has already made progress on with insourcing, we've explained to the committee before that we are using a system which we had already procured within SASSA. We're also currently busy sending out the hardware, the biometric readers, to our local offices. That process for the first lot of 1,300 devices will be completed by the 15th of March, which is tomorrow. And the training of the super users has started. The super users are actually at head office. They were there yesterday and today being trained. And as I've said, the first SOCPIN user, the first SASSA official who's being registered on the system today, it will be done today. And then the ones who are registered are the ones who will be the super users, and they will go and register other users. And then we will roll this out for the biometric registration of the beneficiaries as well. We're also making sure that we get all of the data from CPS, the biometric data that they've collected over the course of the contract, and the verification that we have in fact received everything will be done with together with the information regulator so that we know everything is above board. Just as far as the migration to banks is concerned, we have, as SASSA, been engaging the banks. We had reported to the committee before that the banks indicated that they weren't comfortable talking to us as one unit, all the banks in one room agreeing to one single product because of competition issues. So we went ahead and we engaged with the banks individually to ask them what they would be able to offer if they are saying that they're not at this stage ready to offer the product that SASSA has specified, to at least get an understanding of what their low-cost products are and how they're going to be rolling that out. And in addition to that, we also provided our file after having got approval from the information regulator on the process and the protection of information. We provided our file to the Banking Association through BankServe, and the individual banks. This was done for the banks just to see which people have accounts which they're possibly not using at this stage to get their grants paid into, so that they're able to market whatever they want to do. SASSA is certainly not marketing on behalf of the banks, but that the banks could then go to their clients and say, we see you have a bank account, do you not want to get your grant into it? And just assist in terms of getting the migration to the banks rolled out more effectively. We're starting to get some information back from the banks, and it's really interesting. As soon as we've got it all back, then we would be able to do that analysis and have an indication of how many of our 10.8 million beneficiaries actually have personal bank accounts, and whether we're able to roll that out a lot quicker. On this slide is just an indication of the banks that we have engaged with. These are the ones that responded to our call to come in and say, let's sit around a table, let's discuss what we're looking for, and if you're not able to give that to us, what you as a bank are able to offer. Now, the only bank that was willing to or was able to say at this point that they would be able to give SASSA exactly what we were asking for is UBank. And we are still engaging them. They had to go back and do some work, but they certainly, of all the banks, were the most willing to engage on the product that SASSA was looking for. The others are all bringing in their low-cost or entry-level products. This slide, Chairperson and Honourable Members, is just to give members an idea of the cost of maintaining a personal bank account. There is still information that we are gathering, and the report, once it's final, on all the engagements with the banks will be shared with the committee. This indicates why, despite the fact that people have personal bank accounts, some of them are saying, but I don't want my grant paid into that account because it is expensive. I want a channel where I'm able to access all the money for my grant without anything being taken off for bank charges or any other fees whatsoever. This slide gives an indication of the movement from February to March of people who are choosing to have money paid into their bank accounts. And it has been quite significant. If you can see, Capitec Bank has got 48,000 new beneficiaries that have chosen to have the money paid into their account just in the course of 1 month. So it is the movement is quite significant across all of the banks. You'll also see that we do have 2 of the banks in Namibia, and those are for the citizens in Walvis Bay that we do still continue paying in terms of that agreement. So it doesn't mean the money goes out of the country, it is in terms of a bilateral agreement. As you can see, there's been movement of over 200,000 in the course of 1 month, which really is quite significant. And then this one just gives you the provincial breakdown of the number of beneficiaries and the amounts that are being paid into personal bank accounts for beneficiaries over the course, both for February and for March, where it increased from the 2.3 billion in February to 2.6 billion in March. I've spoken about the use of the cooperative financial institutions. There are currently 27 cooperative financial institutions registered with the Cooperative Banking Development Agency, which is an agency with the National Treasury that is tasked with the responsibility to develop these institutions into fully fledged village banks and other banking services. Now, they're really very keen to play in the grant payment space, particularly for their members. But we have looked at the 27, and of those 9 are probably ready for us to start engaging with. But of the 9, 3 definitely are ready. They have the online systems, they have the accounting systems, they are liquid, they're able to assist us. So we will be engaging very specifically with them, but then also through the CBDA with the remaining 9 to get them up to a standard where they're able to operate and do the grant payments as well. The 3 that are ready, the one is in Northwest, the one is in Limpopo, and the other one is in Durban. The one in Durban, unfortunately, is right in the center of town, which doesn't help us to expand our footprint. We're really looking for the ones in the more rural areas that would really help us with infrastructure in those areas. Chairperson, I'm not going to speak to this one. We've spoken before about the continued challenge that we have with the rollout of the Easy Pay cards. Safe to say that for any beneficiary who currently chooses to have their grant paid into an Easy Pay account, and that is their choice because this is a bank product, we insist that they have got to follow the same rules as anybody else who comes to us and says, I want my money paid into my First National account or into my ABSA account. So there are no different rules whatsoever for the Easy Pay accounts, account holders. The cash payments, and just a little bit of progress on that, we did report previously that we had advertised the tender for the cash payments. just to confirm that the tender did in fact close on Monday, the 12th of March. So we're now in the evaluation process, and there are very strict timeframes so that we're able to finish the contracting by May and have the service provider to have May and June to actually set up and be ready to start taking over the cash payments as from the 1st of July. And we'll be monitoring that very, very closely. Just to alert the honourable members that we had one of the potential bidders had kept asking us to extend the closing date and extend again. And in fact, had asked it to be to the 30th of March, but that was not approved, and the bids did close on Monday, the 12th of March. Just also, and we had mentioned it at the last meeting, that CPS did lodge an application in the Constitutional Court just to confirm that they were not prohibited from participating in the cash tender process, and the court in fact supported them. So they were given permission to participate. We will see once the evaluation is done whether that in fact did happen. Then if we start looking at the post offices, and certainly as quickly as possible, we would want the post office outlets that are ready to come on board. And we have done an analysis with the post office, and we'll give some breakdown about that, to try and have the post office, as much as we will be doing electronic payments through them, through the post bank, the new SASA post bank card. We also will be able to use some of the post office counters for over-the-counter cash payments, and particularly the post offices that are within a 5-kilometre radius of our pay points, to see how we can progressively move our pay points and either amalgamate or relocate some of the pay points so that we can reduce the cash pay points, but it would be done in a progressive manner so that we don't just suddenly go in and close pay points. We are busy rolling out the agreement with the post office, and as the honourable members are aware, there are 4 services that the post office will provide. The first one being the electronic banking services for the 5.7 million, or whatever number is left when people have chosen whether they want to have personal bank accounts. They will also, and those will be done through the special disbursement accounts that the Post Bank will open. They will also responsible for the onboarding of new beneficiaries who choose to be paid through the new SASA card. And to do this, they will have a presence at our local offices, and we're looking at the remote account opening so that people don't have to come to us, get their application approved, and then go to the post office to open an account, and then come back to us again to confirm that information. So we're looking to see how we can make that process a lot quicker and a lot more user-friendly for the beneficiaries. They're also responsible for the biometric authentication of beneficiaries, and that is to confirm that the beneficiary is in fact who they say they are and is the person that SASA has processed the application for before they onboard them and issue the new card. And then the development of software, which is the integrated grant payment system. Those were the 4 services that Post Office is ready. Now, in terms of where they are with readiness for April, and just to remind the honourable members that the agreement we've signed with the Post Office says that they will be implementing their solution as from the 1st of April, and that there is a transition period. It doesn't mean that come the 1st of April they will be doing everything. In terms of the agreement signed, there is a 6-month transition period for them to be able to start issuing the cards, doing the card swap and so on, and making sure that these systems are up and running. The one thing that we had wanted to do, that we intended to do, was that we would open a holding account within the Post Bank environment, and from that holding account, which is like a big account where the big money would sit, there would be special disbursement accounts, and the money to the special disbursement accounts, which are for the individual beneficiaries, would flow from the holding account. We have received a letter from National Treasury that is not approved that holding account be opened in the Post Bank environment. And the reasons given for that is, firstly, that the Post Bank doesn't have a full banking license, that they still rely on Standard Bank as their banker, and there are certain restrictions in terms of how much money can be deposited into the Post Bank because they work under the Standard Bank. Now, both SASSA and the Post Office are engaging National Treasury on this to see what else we are able to do to be able to make the system work. Treasury has confirmed that it doesn't affect the opening of the special disbursement accounts for the beneficiaries. That can still be done, but it is just the engagement around the holding account. This does have an impact on how SAPO had costed their services. So we are busy engaging them in terms of the costing for the services and just in terms of how they, exactly what they will need to be paid for and what those costs will be. And then it does mean that as soon as the service provider for the cash disbursements have been appointed, then that service provider, we would have to open a specific dedicated account from which that service provider could interact. As I've spoken about, we are engaging with National Treasury on this, and that the costing model will have to be looked at between SASSA and SAPO in terms of the impact of those changes. The special disbursement account, as I've said, the Treasury decision doesn't impact on the special disbursement accounts, and in fact, SAPO Postbank tested the bulk opening of 1,000 beneficiary accounts with existing data, and that was successfully done on the 26th of February. So we know that it can work. This is what we will use to be able to help us do the card swap as existing beneficiaries come in with the current card and get the new card if they choose to be paid through the SASSA card. In terms of the integrated payment system, and this is the software development that they're busy with, there was a delay with the procurement process within the Post Office, and so it certainly won't be ready on 1 April. However, there are contingencies that have been put in place by the Post Office in that they will use their existing banking platform, and then as they finalize the integrated platform that would ultimately be handed over to SASSA, then they will just move the data in within the current banking platform into the new integrated platform. It will have no impact on the beneficiaries and certainly no cost implications for beneficiaries or for SASSA. In terms of the card body production, we are on track with this. The first batch of cards are expected to be delivered on the 16th of March, on Friday this week. But once the cards have been delivered, they then need to be tested by the Payment Association and get visa certification. Now, the visa certification they're expecting by the 19th of March. The PASA certification, they're hoping to receive that by the 30th of March so that the cards would be ready to roll out from the 3rd of April, which is the first working day in April. However, if there is any delay in that process, then we have agreed with them that they will continue using their existing Mzansi Bank accounts. It's accounts that they already have for our beneficiaries, and as the new card comes, there will just be the exchange of cards again. But we're doing everything we can not to have an impact on the beneficiaries with this, so it is something that is being managed. It does mean that from the 3rd of April, when SAPO is expected to have a presence in all of our local offices, to be able to onboard new beneficiaries that are approved from the 3rd of April, that if the card has not yet been certified as being operational within the payment space in South Africa, then those new beneficiaries would get the Mzansi card if they choose that method of payment. In terms of the card swap program, and this is the program where beneficiaries would be expected to bring in their existing SASSA card that they're using to transact with and exchange it for the new SASSA card. And that would be done, and the planning has been done that it would be done over a period of 6 months of the phase in and phase out. There is a delay of a month. And the biggest reason for this is that the mobile equipment which SAPO needs is not yet ready. There's been some delays in the procurement process. However, they are pushing with that. In the meantime, the onboarding of new beneficiaries will take place at the SASSA offices. Some of the post offices and some of their depots could be used for issuing of the new SASSA SAPO card as soon as it has been certified. But the actual card swap, the big project, would then start in earnest from the 30th of April, because the delivery of the equipment that is needed, the mobile equipment, is expected sometime towards the end of April. The biometric engine that the post office is required to procure to be able to do the authentication, the biometric authentication of beneficiaries, is also not yet ready. There's been some delays in the procurement process on that side. However, there is nothing that stops them using our biometric engine, which we're busy testing right now and will be rolling out. So it should not have any impact on the processes that we have plotted for going forward. Now, we've already spoken about the phasing out of CPS. We know that the current SASSA card has been extended, so it will continue to work during this period of phase in and phase out. And we have got a very clear plan together with Post Office as our partner to be able to do this. And some of the other things that I have already spoken to in terms of how we will progressively phase CPS out of the payment space. Now, the live testing of the new SASSA SAPO card is still on track, and we will be doing that during the month of March. And we want to test that, do end-to-end testing to make sure that when we really start with issuing that card in big numbers, that it has been tested and that any challenges have actually been ironed out. So we have identified 4 areas, 4 local offices that we will be doing we'll be doing a launch on the 22nd of March, and then doing the pilot project in these offices. And those are in Manguzi in KwaZulu-Natal, Mount Fletcher in Eastern Cape, Tonga in Mpumalanga, and Worcester in the Western Cape. And the reason these have been chosen, rather than saying, let's go to Durban or Pretoria, is to say that if we know that if the system works in the more rural areas, then it definitely will work in the more urban areas. We're usually inclined to start testing in the urban areas and then expect it to work in the rural areas where you may have challenges with connectivity of systems and so on. So, under guidance of our minister, she said, test it in the rural areas, and then you can prove to people that the system works, the end-to-end system works, and then you can progressively roll it out. Just to also say that there will be an invitation to the Portfolio Committee members to attend the launch or to any of the other offices when we do start with the pilot project, so that you can actually see it for yourself, ask questions, engage with people, and just make sure that everything is working as it is planned to work. Now, and when I go into the contingency plan, I want to just raise an issue which has been very topical over the past week. The honourable members would have known that there was argument in the Constitutional Court on Tuesday last week, the 6th of March, around the request by SASSA for the continuation for a period of phase in and phase out of the current CPS contract, a very limited continuation, particularly to get support for the cash payments. And the Post Office also put in an application asking for the phase in, phase out period of 6 months to allow them to bring in their processes. None of the parties that are involved in this opposed the relief that we were looking for. Some of them did have additional requirements that they wanted the court to look at, and there was argument in court last week. And then on Thursday, there was and one of the things that was said by our counsel in the court is that SASSA does not have a contingency plan. That was said very clearly, and yet at a press briefing that was attended to by our CEO and the CEO of the Post Office, it was said SASSA has a contingency plan, and these contradictions were then brought into the public domain. And SASSA was asked to file written submission by Monday, the 12th of March, to the court explaining the discrepancies. We did that, and all the other parties have got until today to lodge their papers, and then we will be waiting for the court to give further direction. We're hoping that that direction comes really soon. I do want to say under the contingency plan is that SASSA has had a contingency plan, and this is maybe where it becomes, some people would say semantics. We don't think so, but that we've had a contingency plan which covers the full spectrum of payments. And in fact, that is what we have been implementing by taking responsibility progressively for different aspects of the payment function. The direct transfers into the bank accounts, into the personal bank accounts, was part of that contingency. The taking over the management of Regulation 26A was part of that. The reactivation of our own account within the PMG environment. So, as well as the testing the direct transfers into the SASSA account. All of that has been part of this broad contingency where we did not have detail and where we're still working on things now, and it is being discussed currently at IMC and Cabinet. So we're not able to give too much information until it has been consulted there, and we're able to then start really fleshing out is the contingency plan for the cash payments. Now we've got ideas, and these were some of the ideas that were presented by the CEO at the press briefing. The initial broad contingency plan was to confirm that we would follow an open tender process for the cash payments, which we have done. However, there are delays, so we know that the cash payment tender, that the cash service provider is only going to be ready to start paying by the 1st of July. So we're still sitting with a gap of a few months, and we're needing to say, okay, that's the reality we're facing now. If court does not grant the phase-in and phase-out period, how are we going to manage that? And that is work that is being presented to the IMC, is being discussed by Cabinet this morning, and there's lots of work being done on that. Just some of the basic principles that we are proposing around the cash payments is that we would do the direct deposits. Everybody currently who gets paid has either a personal bank account or a SASSA card, regardless of whether they draw in cash at a pay point or not. So we need to have a mechanism to be able to deposit money into those either the personal accounts or the card accounts for everybody. We have identified post offices that are within a 5-kilometer radius of the pay points so that people are able to be redirected to that point to go and get their cash over the counter. We've also written to the Banking Association to ask them to engage with the banks to say, these are where we have our pay points. Are you able to mobilize mobile infrastructure to provide services and bring services to the people rather than taking people to the services? And then as an absolute last resort, but it really is almost trying to deal with the few people who would fall through the cracks, is to then say, how do we get those people to infrastructure where they're able to access their money? So, but the detail of this is what is being discussed by the IMC currently. This just gives you an idea of the regional breakdown of the number of people who get their money in cash against the number of cash pay points that we currently have. And Chairperson and Honourable Members, I must again apologise. On your presentation, I had swapped the numbers around for Northwest and Northern Cape. If you could just correct that on your document. Northwest has the 664 pay points and Northern Cape 395. So in total, we have 8,433. Now, some of the members would say to me, oh, but SASSA's always spoken about 10,000 pay points. The difference between the 8,433 and the 9,900 pay points that we always report is that some of these pay points are used on more than one day. So it's the same pay point, but it's used on multiple days. And because it's used on multiple days, it was counted as different pay points, but it's actually the one point. It's the one building or whatever. And that is why the number is actually 8,433. Also, as we progress, these numbers are expected to reduce as we start using infrastructure which is in close proximity to these pay points. Now, just some of the work that has been done that is being presented to the IMC is to say how many post offices are within 2 kilometres of the pay point, and then how many within 5 kilometres. And we've given the breakdown per province of the ones within 2 kilometres. These are 862 post office outlets in total, and the beneficiaries who are served by the pay points in that vicinity are just over 745,000. So it already starts saying we can distill those numbers quite significantly as we look to building on the contingency plan for the cash payments. The biometrically enabled ATMs, and I've given the breakdown per province for those, as well as the biometrically enabled point of sale devices. So these would be, this would reflect infrastructure that people who collect currently in cash using a biometric should be able to access relatively easily. We need to distill the numbers further and to now start looking at the specific detail in terms of, if I say there are 745,000 people, who are those people and how do we get to them to explain to them what the options are for payment? And that is the work that is currently going on at the moment. We did want to raise that as we're thinking about this contingency plan, which I do need to stress has not been finalized, that there are risks that we have raised. Firstly, we are saying to people, if push comes to shove, there is no other choice. You're forced to transact in the national payment system. There are costs to the beneficiaries, and that is something we really don't want to see. It is one of the things that we're looking at very seriously to say, how do we reduce the inconvenience for beneficiaries, and how do we get them to be able to access money without incurring costs? If we have to be able to transport people, just the sheer costs and logistics of that is an extreme, it's a project on its own. So it's not something we're taking lightly and just saying this will be done. We're looking at all the other alternatives. We're also very mindful of possible resistance by community members if we were just to summarily close pay points without a consultation process. We know some of those pay points have been in the communities for a really long time. You don't just walk in today and say, sorry, it's not going to happen anymore. There is a process of engagement with the local leadership, which is really, really important, and with the beneficiaries who are affected. We do appreciate that if we have to implement a contingency, any kind of contingency, there is a disruption. It does affect the smooth payment process because you've got to go out, you've got to constantly be speaking to people, you need to deploy as many staff as you can. We're very mindful of these. And then for the beneficiaries who've been transacting at cash pay points, if they had to transact in the national payment system, they would have to get PIN numbers. These beneficiaries have been using biometrics. A lot of them were given PIN numbers, but the question is, do they still remember those PIN numbers because they haven't been using them? Or do we have to reset them, and just the logistics of managing that PIN reset or the setting of PINs at local offices is something that we're looking at very, very seriously. So, Chairperson and honourable members, thank you very much. That is just to summarise where we are at the moment and work that is still ongoing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your very informative information. Before I allow the members whom I've already identified, can I just make this observation that if you can look at 18, I'm very happy that this cooperative financial institution and payment has come to be clarified in this forum, because the small business people believe very strongly that this is their terrain. This is where they should be paying. But I'm happy it's now saying specifically financial institutions, because everyone used to have a tuck shop or whatever, thought they would be vendors. So I think this has been clarified for all of us. So can I allow me, I just wanted to isolate this one because it's also somehow misleading. I mean, the understanding of our people out there that because I own this shop here, I would become someone who is doing this work. But here it's very clear that is fine if you've been dealing with finance. Honorable Bongi, in that row, please, honorable members, I can do that. After you, and then that row after that row. Thank you very much. Bongi, Abraham, Matlopa, Umamu, Masango, Umama, Malhas, Umamu Yuste. Almost all the members.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And let me also welcome the presentation by Sasa here. Chair, you will pardon me because last week I was not part of the committee. So maybe some of the questions I might take you back to last week because I was not part of the committee yet. The last time when I was in the committee, I had some questions that I expected answers. Unfortunately, I had to do some parliamentary work outside the Cape Town last week. But then if perhaps, Chairperson, I'm asking something already that was presented last week, I know you'll take me, you'll explain it to me separately that this matter has been explained when you were not here. For example, let me start. On the last meeting, Chair, I asked a question on the issue of the cash payment, that perhaps SASSA should give us a clear breakdown of the areas where they are going to distribute cash payments so that we are able to do our oversight. For example, since my constituency is in Bloemfontein, I would really be interested in, I know in Bloemfontein cash payment might not be there, but it might be there also. So which exactly did they give you the request as we requested that perhaps we should get that information? If that information, Chairperson, was presented, then that question would fall off. I'll wait the Chairperson's office to give me the exact places where the cash payment is going to be taking place. Chair, let me take you to page 35. When I was reading the report, Chair, when I got the report, it's a pity because really we didn't anticipate that there's going to be a cabinet where they had to present, and at the same time there's also a portfolio committee that we are expecting. I had a lot of questions, Chair, on the issue of the cash payment, especially on the risk related to the contingency, because if you remember the last time, actually when I was reading the report, especially on the matter of the plan around the costs, the logistics of the transport, and all of that, I had questions, Chair, that we are talking about 2 million cash beneficiaries, eh? I'm speaking under correction. And one would assume out of that 2 million, it's elderly people, it's disabled people, and also the child support grant. But then my question was around that if they are planning to transport the elderly, the disabled, the vulnerable, the whole vulnerable group, what mode of a transport are they going to use? And what are the costs related to the transport that they are going to use? And was it also budgeted for the money that they're going to use to transport? Is it the money budgeted for? And under which line item is the money going to come from? Because as far as I remember, under this financial year, we didn't appropriate for that, unless when they come again for this for the financial year that we are going to have or to start from 2 weeks from now, then perhaps they've budgeted for it. Can they just clarify, in case we get to that, where will they get the money for that, the cost of the transport, the breakdown also? I'll also be interested in the breakdown. They might not have the answer on the breakdown that how many elderly people will need to be transported, how many people who are disabled will need to be transported, and which areas are mostly going to be affected. Because where I'm sitting, areas that are, I believe, areas that are going to be affected is rural areas. And in rural areas, you will understand the mode of transport that we are using. It's not as comfortable as we know, all of us. And in some areas, like Emaseleni and Ngobo, you even struggle with the roads and all those things. So can they perhaps clarify us more on that? But also, Chair, if they don't have answers today for that, can we then get more details on the issue if it will happen that we go through that route? Also on the matter, Chair, because one would also assume that if they have to transport I think in the last meeting they were saying they will transport the ATMs. I've never been in the cash where they disinvest cash payments. Even when I'm home in my rural areas, normally I don't know what is it that they do. I'm also sitting here to say it will mean SASSA will also have to provide security. And what type of security are they anticipating they will provide? Will they provide the security under the security cluster of the Republic of South Africa? Or are they going to get the security that is outside the formal security that we have within the country? And also, even the issue of such security will mean budget. That information, Chair, I'm really interested in knowing that. How is it going to happen, and what are the costs, and the cost per region, on all of this cash transportation and everything? Can we also perhaps get the cost for the region? I'm interested because my region is very poor. In the division of revenue share, we get a lot of a small amount from the DORA. You'll hear from tomorrow that Free State we get a small portion there. So I'm interested that in my region, in terms of the allocation, perhaps the breakdown should also be in a form of knowing the districts, if they are using the district or the regions. Chair, the last question will be on the. But let me comment before I come to the chair to the question, Chair. My comment will be on the issue on the refusal of the National Treasury to grant that. Is it the holding account? For the opening of the holding account, Chair, because SAPO, National Treasury, we are talking about our own things. SAPO is our own. And SAPO has been struggling for a long time now to get a commercial certificate. So, Chair, I think on this one, I would really put a request on you as a chairperson that in your platforms where you sit as different chairperson, even including the chairpersons of finance, the chairpersons, all that are responsible for National Treasury and the South African Reserve Bank, please raise this matter with them. Because this is the matter that is important to us. This is the matter that is in the resolutions of the ruling party, that we must make sure that we capacitate SAPO, we capacitate the post office. So how are we going to do that if our own, we refuse to give a certificate? We struggle. A government entity struggles to get a commercial certificate. A government entity is struggling to get whatever that is supposed. I'm assuming that because SAPO is our own, as much as perhaps they might not have capacity, like they are saying, where would they get capacity? So I'm really, it's a request to you, Chair, that in the platforms where you sit with other chairpersons that are responsible for these entities, do raise this matter, because this is the matter that is very important to me as a member of the African National Congress, because of the fact that this is the resolution of my organization. So, Chair, the last question then is on the issue.
I'm sure it's the last
on page 25. Yeah. No, that one was a comment to you, Chair. Remember, I said it. I started with a comment. On page 25, let's get to page 25 of the presentation. 25 from which one is that? Okay. Chair, I'm looking at the page 25. I'm really impressed with what is reported on page 25. I think it's a serious, it's a real progress that what we're really looking for as honorable members, to see something that at least lifts your spirit with all the SASSA issues that are going out there. When you get out, you hear this tomorrow, the other day you will hear this. So this one, at least it has lifted my spirit. But on that matter, I just want to come on the matter of the costing model by SAPO has to change since it was based on the specification provided by SASSA. Now, my question is, does it have an impact on the budget allocation, the changing of the costing model? If it does, can they elaborate more on that matter, Chair? Thank you.
Before, Honorable Bev, I think the matter that Honorable Masichaba is raising, the one on the letter from National Treasury, should be discussed with a clear mind that it is not impacting on the transition, but it's a matter that National Treasury raises that it's not going to happen, but it's not going to impact now. The contingency plan is there, but I think SAPO must do the right thing, and us as we are here, to ensure that they get the required compliance in order to do this work. Because we must also avoid loopholes and doing things in a manner that we want to achieve that goal. We should go all out to ensure that they get the necessary requirement so that in future we will not find ourselves practicing what is not excellent. But now I want to assure honorable members, when I made an inquiry from Treasury after I had heard about the letter, they were able to say, relax, it's not now. This contingency plan, we have agreed with participants, but in future, this is what must be done. So can I allow the member, therefore, to, if I agree with all honorable members, why don't I take 4 and allow answers, because your questions are a bit broad. So I will, because I don't want to limit, career limiting is always prevented. So I'm going to allow you to ask all the questions you want. But at least when we reach Mama Masango, we'll give them time to answer. And then we start from afresh so that we can clear some of the questions. Mama Bev, you are on the floor.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, and thank you, Ms. Dunkley, for a very formative presentation. We sincerely appreciate it. Honourable Chairperson, it's also good to hear that SASA and SAPO are joined. We've been waiting to see this SAPO and SASO logo for a long time, and we just hope that you guys are actually holding hands together and making sure that the beneficiaries receive their grants on the 1st of April. So thank you for that. On page 28, regarding the card swapping at identified community halls and other identified venues, will only take place on the 30th of April, once this package suitcases have been obtained. My question, Chairperson, how secure is the method of these suitcases? We're trying to avoid all this corruption and fraud, and we're having a suitcase. We want to know how secure the suitcase is. Yes, and then also I think we've asked many a times how SASA and SAPO, at our last portfolio committee, we actually asked how is SASA and SAPO communicating to the community? When you speak to the community, they sort of, by word of mouth, some say that they have never heard about the swapping of the cards. How is that communicated? We also find that community would complain and say that they've been to SAPO, they've been to wherever, and then they've got to turn back. Some of our beneficiaries have to take a taxi, and it costs them money. Can we speed up that and just have a smooth running process where people don't have to have a double journey to obtain a card? Are there any risks involved relating to the Cooperative Banking Development Agency? Because we're scared when we hear about all these things. And in terms of the Easy Pay account system, Chairperson, will debit orders be allowed on this card? We'd like to see everybody having one SASA card, but it seems like we're not going to have it at the end of the day. And does all SAPO outlets have ATMs? I've also had engagement with the community where they say, yes, SAPO won't be charging any fees, but SAPO don't have ATMs. Maybe that can just be clarified if that will take place. Also, a risk factor, the PIN setting. How will that be secured when you hear that PINs will be issued? How do you know that you will know the PIN? Can you change? Will there be an option for people to actually change their PINs once they have received the PIN? Because we know there's a high risk involved in the PIN. I thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Madlopa.
Thanks, Honorable Chair. Thanks to SASA presentation. I think Ms. Dudley was very clear in her presentation, and now we can see the consistency from the previous presentation, which makes us comfortable now to say that really we are going forward. you have raised the issue of the contradictions on page 21 that the court had a concern with. I think in your presentation, I think we're in the other building when we were doing before last presentation, you raised that there are thoughts about the contingency plan, which was not the actual contingency plan. It's when we raise concern that led to you identifying the risk that we're raising in the meeting to say that if you say you'll be transporting people, you know, I think you must go back, sit down and look at it, how we are going to do it, because it was not a contingency plan. The way it was presented, it was equivalent to a green paper. If there is something like that, when we were presenting, there was nothing, but there were thoughts to say that we think this is what is going to happen. And then we said, because now you have submitted your request in the court, go and deal with this contingency plan. And then, but now what I want to check, because we understood the general contingency plan that you had, but we wanted the specific one now, the contingency plan, if court refuses to grant you the 6 months extension for phase in, phase out, you know. So we wanted that one. At the moment, in the last week, you also indicated that you are still awaiting for the outcome of the court. But we said, whilst you are waiting for the outcome of the court, finalize the issue of the contingency plan, so that if now they don't agree, the people are not going to be affected, the beneficiaries in particular, you know. But you said now they are doing that presentation, and this is, I don't know whether it's our last meeting, yeah, towards our last meeting, you know, to go on recess. My concern is that when are we going to get that contingency plan? Because when we go out on the constituency work, we must communicate with the people on the ground to allay the fears from the beneficiaries, to say that this is the contingency plan in regard to when the court is refusing to grant extension. I'm glad to hear that there was no opposition for your request for the extension, but this contradiction or confusion or misunderstanding that happened in the court and in the media, that need to be clarified, because when you did the presentation, you said it was just discrepancy, because you have to emphasize, because we are parliament, people are seeing us, what was the discrepancy, so that you say it categorically, so that when the people at home or the beneficiaries are listening, they know exactly that the contingency plan that you were speaking with was general. Because when you presented to us, you never said that there is a contingency plan. You said there are thoughts, and then you said, no, we are having, there are risks in what you are telling us, as my colleague is saying, that transporting disabled people and so on and so forth. And I even said in that meeting, please, you can't just go on the pay point and take people same time, you know. You must make a plan and present to us to say that maybe they know it in advance, because that's why we asked even the numbers per pay point, to say how many numbers, so that you know when you plan how much transport is going to happen. So that is what we want to really get a clarity. The contingency plan to us is very critical. And also, coming to that one, can you assure us to say that come 1st of April 2018, no beneficiaries are going to be affected not getting what they are supposed to get? Because that is important to us as public representatives, to say that nobody must be affected by that one. Lastly, Chair, I'm having a concern. You know, we're in the forefront fighting as this portfolio committee to say that this phase in, we want to empower the government institutions. We want to capacitate them.
We are sick and tired after 24 years of democracy to hear that there are no capacity within the government institutions. Hence, we said this particular service must be given to SAPO and SASSA to try and phase in-source, to do the in-sourcing. But I'm not comfortable if I say this. It's like people that are benefiting more are commercial banks. The number that we are saying we are in-sourcing, I really don't see it, Chair. I'm worried about that. Because if we are saying in-sourcing, we want to see SASSA being capacitated, doing this service internally, together with SAPO. But now, when you look at this, the number is not even 30%. Maybe that is going to be serviced by the government institutions or related institutions. So it's a concern to me that I don't know, Chair, how are we going to deal with that particular thing? Because really, we are not capacitating the government. That's what we're saying. We want these institutions to be capacitated, but now it's being commercialized. It's really commercialized. How are we going to deal with that? When are we going to capacitate government institutions to do the job internally? Because this thing is costing us a lot. I'm worried to say that if the beneficiaries are continuing with the commercial banks, how much is it going to be charged? Because they have not yet agreed to what the SASSA is negotiating, to say this is the way that we think it must be done, because this is really not a salary. It's government intervention in the poverty alleviation. And you see 30% deductions. It's no more going to where the government intended it to go, to alleviate poverty. This is my concern as a public representative. I think something needs to be done, Chair. And I want to support my colleague, Honorable Bongi. Oh, yeah, my colleague. You know, I think she is correct, said, you know, this holding account, even if it is not to say that it's not going to affect this process that we are in, but it is our concern. It's a long-standing, you know, request and resolution to say that SAPO must be empowered to become a commercial bank. If we as members of parliament, we can't push it, and the government institutions like Treasury, they are not assisting, you know, because they have got a responsibility to assist SAPO in order for it to be self-reliant to service the public. I think it's something I agree with her that this thing needs to be pushed if it means that the requirement has not yet been met. But Treasury has got the responsibility to assist SAPO and SASSA so that this thing is realized. They have this holding account. Thanks, Chair.
Honorable Masango, I also want to, I'm not really wanting to limit you, but I just want to make this notion that amongst us we have invited the provinces specifically to be able to talk on issues that Honorable Mashaba raised as to lower say Eastern Cape Magacho kuzokwenzekani stake, lower say Gauteng acho. So up now we are being informed at this level nationally, but as they sit, they are actually working on a response that says, here in Bloemfontein, this is the stations we have because that's our operational space. But we allowed that the first information comes from national, and then we'll get the detail at a level. I just wanted to actually also make them aware of our expectation. Immediately, the national has responded to its own presentation. I allow you, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I think some of the questions have already been asked by colleagues that I had in mind, but one couldn't emphasize more the issue of beneficiary communication of this whole process, which is so critical. Chair, my question goes back to the slide that spoke to the fact that Bank sounded like they were going to be friendly to SASSA in this regard, and one wants to know. Let's assume that the new bank comes through with this, and we are able to sort of work with them in this space. What implications will this have for the other banks and even for SAPO for that matter? To say that we are actually getting the service from your bank that we would like in terms of costs and things like that. So one would like to know what implications that would have. Also, Chair, my question is sort of motivated by the fact that we've had, as SASSA, that is, we've had to be in and out of courts because of the work of SASSA. And when we talk about how we are going to distribute the grants in a way that, as my colleagues have said, is supporting government entities, I believe that it's somewhere in the law, in the act, that the beneficiaries can use banks as SASSA is doing at the moment. Where is that we can use cooperative financial institutions? I don't know what institution that is actually. Maybe I need to be brought on board about what institution is that. Where does it fall in? Is it a fully fledged financial institution as a bank, or what does it need to have for us to be confident that we are working with them within the ambit of the law that established the work of SASSA, as it were? Also, Chair, when Mrs. Dunkley said, when she introduced the issue of contingency, she says, I have a little bit of progress. And I think that point has been covered sufficiently by colleagues. But I had put it here to say, if we are getting a little bit of progress here, can you imagine 2 weeks from when all this has to take place, how much anxiety that creates? And one is just saying, please, can we get to the stage that my previous speaker was talking about, where we have concrete stuff to work with, even as we go to communities on the ground. The presentation had no less than 3, if I remember well, of the delays that have been experienced after we have asked for 6 months. So my question says that are these delays that we're experiencing now, like the 1 month delay even at some stage, are those delays still accommodated within the 6 months we've asked for? Are those delays still going to put us in a position where in 6 months' time we will be talking about an extension again? Because of course we didn't know that there were going to be challenges with the procurement at SAPO level to be able to take on the work they are supposed to take. So I just want to know if we're still accommodated. One is used now to extension after extension, and one gets nervous when delays are, in fact, delays that are as long as a month even. So that's what I would like to know, Chair. And then, during Chair, and if that question it can even just be, I'm taking advantage of it having been raised during the introductions. At this critical time of SASSA, where SASSA is having to do this transition, is it even for the portfolio committee, is it okay that we are having 7 of our 9 regional executives being acting? I mean, we are where we need we need some stability to be created at a regional level where the tire is hitting the road. And we're talking 7 out of 9 executive, regional executives working there. And how long has this been happening? Really, I would like to know how long this acting has been happening and how much is it costing us. I'm sure the CFO can give us estimates of that, because it's really saying you are acting, you are transitioning, you are this, you are costing money. It's just a list that is not very encouraging to actually go through. That will be all for now, Chair. Thank you.
Before they respond, I fully agree with your concern because of the acting. Because if honorable members remember, we were promised that by April, past April, the acting will have gone. But we will get it from the very executives that are here, that they are going to tell us when did they last had a full-time employed, fully fledged employed executive there. They will also, they must say that as they continue to do their presentation. But sometimes we must take our own, when the net from members is directed to us as the chair, we must also respond. So the secretary must account as to whether Honorable Mashaba's question on information that was to be sent to us, whether that we did receive last week or have we received it. I'm sure the secretary can actually take us through in that one. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. Yesterday, I received a number of, Monday, I received a number of documents from SASSA, including the affidavit by the CEO and all the annexures submitted to court. The information of different regions and for pay points is also in that information pack. There are about 11, 12 documents. Yes, I forwarded that. I'll organize with Nosogo to organize the hard copies. I think some of the information she made the hard copies. Thank you.
So that information, we are going to ensure that it reaches the members, even if now it has not, because it will also give us some clarification on issues. But when we meet next time, we'll also be free to go back to those, because if members want to understand, they should be allowed to, as much as possible, get that information. On the issue that is being raised of National Treasury reluctant or taking time to actually do things, I think honorable members will remember that the issue of licensing, having a license as a bank and so on, has always been in the discussions, if you remember very well, when we were dealing with how is SAPO going to be able to do this work. The other key issue was the issue of licensing, having a bank and banking system, all those very technical matters. I think, therefore, having moved throughout in this transformation process, we are going to definitely need this license. And I think National Treasury and all these other agencies have been part and parcel of joint meetings. After the intervention by the IMC and the Portfolio Committee, they began to sit around the table as a family. And I think that's what they are supposed to be actually preoccupied with, the little long term. But coming to Honorable Masango, I really do agree with you that we have always argued that we must actually relook, not necessarily review, investigate whether SASSA Act is still being observed. because the SASSA Act prescribes that SASSA, we must pay the beneficiaries. It's totally a clause that is there. But seemingly your concern and that of Dr. Madlopa is that seemingly during this transformation process and a strong need, desirable to stop the monopoly that was being implemented by CPS. SAPO is not going to be another CPS that does everything on their own, including loans and other things. It is important that our effort to get things redone in a way that is fair to others. This came in of now SAPO, possibly us making them to do the same as CPS did, and forgetting that all the other measures of CPS were allowing a process of strengthening SASSA to do this work. So if we take our eyes from that ball, at the end, we want a efficient SASSA that will pay our people with dignity. And also that our people were never, Honorable Madlopa, bankable. Now, the list of banks and other things for us as this portfolio committee seem to be using this opportunity to actually take another diversion now that seeks to say we want these people to get to the bank, forgetting that originally SASSA was established because they were poor people who were not bankable. And it is this portfolio committee that has got all the interest to safeguard our legislation, because it has not been amended to allow this commercialization you're talking about. Then I think I'm highlighting this as a chair so that when we have time, we relook and we actually put forward our view that you dare not make SASSA to disappear in the process and to be a conduit to take funds from government then to the banks in a way. We will have to look into that. I am happy it is being raised by Honorable as a caution as we go forward. Let's not move our eyes from the actual ball. So I allow the national to make their responses and allow the two members that had their hands up. You will remember that we had said, because I'm giving much time to members to make their own input and everything. Then when they have responded, I'll come back to the three honorable members, Mama Malkhasi and Mrs. Honorable Juste, and I'll come back to you. Thank you very much. I've seen you raising your hand. Therefore, that's the way we do. Thank you very much. Yes. Oh, okay. I'll attend to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I just want to say and ask for an indulgence of the committee to say that I know a lot of questions have been asked on the contingency plan. May I request that we wait for the direction from the IMC and the Cabinet, and we then have work to do to write up the contingency plan with the detail that would come from that guidance, and we then provide a written document to the committee rather than trying to respond to some of the things now when I'm not aware of what is being discussed in those forums, if I may request that, Chair, but the other questions we'll respond to. The issue of the costing model, I'm going to ask the CFO to speak to that, and he's also going to speak to the issue of the number of acting regional managers and where we are in filling the posts. Because fortunately, we've done a presentation to our minister earlier this week, so we have that information. Just a question around the card swap process and the security of that. The suitcases that are referred to are mobile, it's mobile equipment. Before any card, a new card is given to a beneficiary, the equipment in that suitcase includes a biometric reader. So you can read the biometrics on the old card to make sure you're giving the card to the right person, so that there is security built in there. The communication around the card swap process, we haven't gone out full scale to tell people about venues and so on yet, because we were waiting to make sure that the equipment is available and then the program will be made available. I just want to plead to all the members, please to tell people not to go to the post office outlets now and go and expect a new card. The new cards are not available yet. They are only going to be launched on the 22nd of March, and then they still need to be certified by Visa and PASA. So we will make it known then when the new cards are actually available for rollout and where people can go to collect them. Also understanding that the people who collect their grant in their personal bank accounts don't need to go for that card swap, because they will use their bank card to access their money. So it's the people that receive through the other payment channels. And then just to reassure the honourable members, we're very aware of the inroads that the banks are making on the numbers of beneficiaries. However, we're also subject to a number of court directions that are coming through. And one of the court directions, informed by the panel of experts, is for SASSA to consider how we can use the banking channel a lot more for issues of convenience, and it is allowed in terms of the Social Assistance Act. So we're making sure that there is compliance with the legislation and making sure people exercise an informed choice. For us, that is really important. But at this stage, we're looking at about 2.3 million people who are paid through personal bank accounts, which still leaves about 8 million within the government environment. And that is something that we're looking at very, very closely. The other question that I just want to raise before I will ask specific people to respond to is whether the delays currently being experienced are going to impact on the 6-month period of phase in and phase out. We're very clear, and we've been given a very clear direction by the IMC as well, that we will do everything we have to do to phase in the new service providers within the 6 months. Despite the fact that, for example, the card swap is starting a month late, we will have to just put in additional resources, make sure that our plan fits it, and that by the 30th of September, that process is concluded. So we're not coming back to the committee with a story that we're having to look at a further extension of a phase-in period. It will be done by the 30th of September. And then just the assurance that regardless of anything else that is happening, people will be paid in April. I'm not going to say it may not be without some inconvenience or some anxieties, that I'm not saying, but what I am saying is that people will be paid. There is no question about that. And the money for those who collect with their personal bank accounts will be available on the 1st of April, despite the fact that that falls in the middle of the Easter weekend. We have also made arrangements that our call centre will be open on the 1st and the 2nd for anybody who experiences problems, and that we will have SASSA staff deployed to the bigger merchants and the bigger ATMs to be able to assist anybody should they have any challenges on those days. But payment will happen, and the payment starts on the 1st of April. I'm going to ask the CFO if he will speak to the three things. Firstly, the engagement with UBank, the implication for the costs on the SAPO model, and then the filling of the regional manager post. And then if I can ask Mr. Letsatsi from Communication just to give us a short brief on what we've been doing together with GCIS and the Post Office around communication for this project. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just a minute. Can you give the honorable members the water so that there is no much movement as we continue to do the work? I apologize. Truck, it has just come.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.